Chapter 221. Jean Wan rushed back to the dormitory before bedtime. Right now, she could not stay idle. Her mood would be stifled, so the moment she returned, she rushed to take a shower. After showering, she came out to change her clothes. All of a sudden, she saw Bai Wei bring over the gown she had previously gifted her and place it by the cabinet. "What is it?" Jean Wan turned to look at her. "I've placed it on your bed several times before, but you've always taken it back." Bai Wei said, "This gown is too expensive. I still can't accept it. It's enough for you to dampen Ling Feifei's spirit that time. In any case, she hasn't had much of a temper after being suppressed by you recently. This gown should still be returned to you. It's not that I'm trying to dampen anyone's spirit, but this gown really suits your temperament." Jean Wan turned around, picking up her own clothes and handing the box of gown back to her. "There's no need to return it to me. In the future, I might be able to cooperate with your company in other areas. This can be considered a revolutionary relationship that we've cultivated in T University. There's no need to treat me like an outsider." Hearing these words, Bai Wei could not help but glance at Jean Wan. "I don't know much about Haicheng. I only know that the Ji family is one of the 4 largest families in Haicheng, right?" Jean Wan smiled mildly. "You can say that. In recent years, our family's business hasn't been doing so well. I don't think we can be ranked among the 4 largest families." "You're really modest, that's the truth. Furthermore, none of the students that Professor Lin accepted this time are ordinary. Everyone carries the future hopes of their respective companies. There's nothing to compare. Just focus on getting through the next 3 months." "That's true. In the future, we'll see each other frequently in the business world. It's better to keep a low profile." The two chatted as they returned to the dormitory. When they entered, Ling Feifei was wearing a facial mask and doing yoga exercises in the dormitory. Of the 4 people in the dormitory, Ling Feifei was definitely the best when it came to skincare and maintenance. Bai Wei was second. Bai Wei was already 25 years old. It was necessary for her to take care of her skin daily, but she was not as exaggerated as Ling Feifei. On the other hand, Jean Wan and Feng Ling were the type who, after washing their faces, would sometimes forget to apply toner on their skin and lie down to sleep. However, Jean Wan's skin was too good. Even though she was usually so casual, her skin was still better than Ling Feifei's, who applied tens of thousands of skincare products every day. Even Feng Ling, who lived a rough life, had whiter skin than Ling Feifei. Seeing that Jean Wan and Bai Wei had entered together, Ling Feifei turned to glance at them while pressing down on her thighs. "Gifting a gown worth $1,000,000 is really different. You even want to take a shower together?" Bai Wei glanced at her. "Are you unhappy because someone took your love away from you? Back in that store, when you were facing the bosses of those shopping malls, where did your toughness go? Why didn't I just swipe my card to buy it? Now, he felt unhappy just thinking about it, so he came to find trouble again? Can't you just stop for a day?" Ling Feifei abruptly turned to glare at her. Before she could speak, Jean Wan calmly asked, "That day, when you tried on the other gown, did you tear the zipper of that gown?" Ling Feifei's expression faltered. She immediately shifted her gaze away awkwardly and did not look at them. She angrily sat down by the bed and removed her mask. "That gown wasn't cheap, right?" Bai Wei coldly smiled as she glanced at Ling Feifei. Ling Feifei abruptly glared at Bai Wei. "Why do you care if it was cheap or not? In any case, that branded store has already been removed from the shopping malls. They don't have the right to continue selling there. So what if it's damaged? In any case, they don't dare to ask me for money. Their brand's legal department won't be able to pin the blame on me. Besides, it was so chaotic back then. Who can be sure if it was me who damaged it, or if it was those unlucky employees who helped me put on the gown? Even if you want to testify, it's useless. It's been so many days, but they still haven't come knocking." "Who told you it's just words?" Feng Ling, who was about to fall asleep on the bed, suddenly spoke up. Ling Feifei's expression faltered. She turned to see Feng Ling waving the phone screen in her direction. The recording function, which had lasted for a full 2 minutes, had been stopped. In other words, everything Ling Feifei had said earlier had been recorded. "What are you doing? Hurry and delete it." Ling Feifei panicked. She stood up and rushed over to snatch her phone away. It was not that she could not afford it, but she did not want to embarrass herself. She had already embarrassed herself in front of Jinwan for the past few days. If she were to really be called back to the shopping malls for compensation, where would her face go? Feng Ling casually tossed the phone onto the bed. Her gaze was indifferent as she glanced at Ling Feifei, who was pouncing over. She sat up and casually snapped her hands together. The crisp sound of bones crisscrossing could be heard. Ling Feifei immediately stood stiffly by her bedside, not daring to move. Her hands froze in midair as she glared angrily at the indifferent and cold Feng Ling. Delete that recording. Otherwise, I'll go find Professor Lin tomorrow and tell him that you were recording in your dormitory. You're violating my right to freedom of speech. Go ahead. I don't mind showing the recording to the professor tomorrow. Feng Ling no longer looked at her. She casually stretched out a leg on the bed, causing Ling Feifei to take a small step back in fright. Seeing that Feng Ling was about to lie down and sleep, Ling Feifei glared at the phone she had already tossed under the pillow. She was so angry that her teeth were itching. Jinwan returned to the bedside and picked up the phone. Feng Ling, remember to send me a copy of the recording, just in case. Hearing this, Ling Feifei abruptly turned to glare at Jinwan. Before she could scold her, Bai Wei also spoke up. Send me a copy as well. Ling Feifei abruptly exploded in anger. She casually grabbed a mirror from the bedside table and smashed it harshly onto the ground. In less than a minute, the dormitory management auntie rushed to the door and knocked, scolding, "What time is it? Who caused such a huge commotion?" Ling Feifei. The next day, Ling Feifei was still angry. She took the opportunity when Jinwan went to fetch some hot water in the morning to hand over her own water bottle. Since you're going anyway, isn't your other hand empty? Help me fetch a bottle as well. Ling Feifei's attitude was arrogant and bossy. In any case, she was unwilling to be suppressed by Jinwan's aura. Jinwan did not even look at her and had already left. Ling Feifei abruptly stood up and was about to force her own water bottle into Jinwan's hand. However, the moment she stood up, Feng Ling, who was passing by, kicked the empty water bottle in her hand onto the ground. What are you doing? Ling Feifei saw that Jinwan had already left without looking back. She then glanced at the broken water bottle on the ground and abruptly raised her eyes to glare at Feng Ling. If you want to drink water, pour it yourself. If you want to fetch water, go fetch it yourself. Who are you hoping to serve you? After kicking her, Feng Ling turned and sat down, her tone cold and disdainful. What are you doing? You've been protecting Jinwan ever since you came here. Don't tell me you're the bodyguard she hired? You won't let her do anything. Ling Feifei was angry. She really could not stay in this dormitory any longer. You're right. I'm her bodyguard. Feng Ling narrowed her eyes and sneered. Chapter 222. The next afternoon, there were many cars parked outside T University. None of them looked simple. The students were whispering among themselves, saying that the 2-century-old libraries in T University were about to be renovated. The person who came today was the CEO of a well-known company in the country. He was going to invest in the renovation of T University's library. In the past, investors like this would eventually become honorary principals. This time was likely no exception. If the investment was successful, he would definitely become an honorary principal. After all, T University's library had a history of close to 100 years. Regardless of whether it was tens of millions or hundreds of millions of books, or the ancient building, if it needed to be renovated, it would require a huge investment. This was not something an ordinary company could afford. Hey, have you guys heard? The person who's going to renovate T University's library seems to be from High City. High City? High City is one of the top cities in the country. There are indeed many rich people there. Many well-known corporations in the country have their headquarters in High City. It's no surprise that the other party has such a strong financial strength. Indeed. I wonder which company's CEO is it? Renovating T University's century-old library is a feat that can be recorded in history. Furthermore, it's free of charge. I'm really curious who's so generous. Although they're generous, it's not that simple to say that they're doing it for free. T University is definitely one of the top universities in the country. Due to the huge amount of work required, the century-old library has never been renovated. Now that it's being renovated, it will definitely be widely publicized in the country. Regardless of which company the other party is from, in the future, T University and the various universities in the country, including the education industry, will definitely be implicated. The benefits this will bring are all unimaginable. That's right. How can we easily guess the thoughts of those who stand at the top? Today, such soft discussions could be heard everywhere in T University, especially among the business and corporate management students. The discussions were even more heated. In the afternoon, Jean Wan was in a rush to read through Professor Lin's test questions and did not eat anything. In the afternoon, during the break, she went to the cafeteria to buy some food. Along the way, she overheard the group's discussion. When she heard that the investor was from High City, she subconsciously glanced out of the cafeteria's window toward T University. She couldn't see the cars parked outside from this distance, so she just glanced at them and walked out with the food she had just bought. Haicheng was indeed the most prosperous city in the country, and it was also a gathering place for talented people. There were many famous and wealthy groups there, and T-City was also an educational institution on par with Peking University and Tsinghua University in the country. It was not impossible for a big shot from an investment group to suddenly have an interest in the education industry. In the evening, the day's classes ended. Bai Wei said that she had a friend she had worked with in the past to meet and invited the two of them out to relax. The three of them brought their books back to the dormitory and changed their clothes. Just as they were about to leave, Ling Feifei suddenly ran in. After entering the room, she began to search for clothes and hurriedly searched for various skincare products and cosmetics. It was as though she was in a hurry to go on a date or meet someone important. "Why are you all looking at me?" As Ling Feifei swiftly powdered her face, she glanced at them from the corner of her eyes. "You've also returned to change?" Did she also want to have a chance encounter with President Mo? "Usually, all of you don't look like much, but when it comes to it, all of you are even faster than me." When Jean Wan and Feng Ling heard the words President Mo, their expressions changed slightly. However, Bai Wei looked at Ling Feifei as though she was crazy. "What President Mo, what chance encounter? It's cold tonight. We just came back to change our jackets before heading out." Ling Feifei clearly did not believe Bai Wei's words. "Who are you trying to fool? Based on your abilities, you should have already heard that the library's investor is High City's MO Corporation. The president of MO Corporation is personally visiting our T University. Many of the girls who boast about their beauty have returned after class to change and put on makeup, hoping to catch a glimpse of President MO before he leaves. That's the MO Corporation we're talking about. If we can have a romantic encounter with President MO, if we can sit in his car, or even have dinner together, just thinking about it makes me excited." Bai Wei was stunned. Of course, she had heard of the MO Corporation. Her company had applied to work with the MO Corporation several times, but all of them had been rejected. This company was an unreachable planet to many corporations in the country. Although the MO Corporation had many partners in the country and had many subsidiary companies, the MO Corporation's main focus was not on T-City. Furthermore, they did not have much contact with the education industry. Why would they suddenly invest so much money to rebuild T University's library? Although this would bring about many profitable paths for the education industry, with the MO Corporation's solid strength and the MO family's foundation, the education industry in the country could not compare to the MO Corporation's original investment prospects. Why would they suddenly involve themselves in this area? Bai Wei was still in a daze when she suddenly heard a pung sound from the dormitory door. She turned to see that for some reason, Jean Wan had suddenly walked out with quick steps. "Jean Wan." Bai Wei thought that something had happened and rushed to open the door to look outside. She saw that Jean Wan was walking quickly without turning back, as though she had something urgent to attend to. Feng Ling's expression was calm and indifferent as she walked out. She calmly said, "I'll go take a look." Jean Wan walked out of the dormitory and headed straight for the school building. Those few words kept repeating in her mind. COMO. Usually, whenever there were meetings or important matters, they would be held at the top floor of the school building. Jean Wan's footsteps were fast. Even Feng Ling took a long time to catch up to her. The school building had over 10 floors. The elevator at the end of the corridor did not allow students to use it without permission. Jean Wan took the stairs step by step and finally reached the top floor. She turned to see that the lights in the principal's conference room were indeed lit. "You're T University students? Who allowed you to come to the school's office? Don't you know that students are forbidden from entering this floor?" T University's dean walked out from the office by the side. When he saw Jean Wan and Feng Ling, he immediately furrowed his brows and reprimanded them in dissatisfaction. However, Jean Wan's gaze was directed toward the principal's conference room. "What are you looking at? Why aren't you going down?" the dean urged with a cold expression. The door to the conference room was tightly shut. Only the light from inside could be seen. "May I ask when the meeting inside will end?" Although the dean's attitude was not good, Jean Wan still tried her best to ask politely. Chapter 223. Coincidentally, at this moment, Professor Lin came out of the conference room. The moment he saw Jean Wan, he was surprised. "Jean Wan? Why are you here?" Jean Wan looked back and saw Professor Lin hurriedly coming towards her. "Just in time. I was planning to go back to my office to get the materials for the business management and business management courses. The school leaders and investors are going to inspect our department. Help me get them. The materials are all on my desk. Go through them carefully and send them directly to the conference room after you get them." Professor Lin was very confident in Jean Wan. After instructing her, he rushed back to the conference room. Jean Wan only hesitated for a second before turning to head down the stairs. Feng Ling was a temporary transfer student, and her mind was not focused on business management. She did not know much about the materials Professor Lin needed. Jean Wan searched the office alone for about 10 minutes. After arranging all the materials Professor Lin needed, she placed them into a folder and brought them to the top floor of the school building. Seeing that she had really brought them over and that Professor Lin had personally instructed Jean Wan to bring the materials in, the dean did not stop her. He stepped forward to open the conference room door. Before Jean Wan entered, he warned, "Don't speak carelessly in there. It's rare for the school leaders to gather together, as well as the library's investors. Remember, don't speak carelessly." "Jean Wan, I understand. Thank you." After entering, the voices of the school leaders could be heard in the conference room. The moment Jean Wan entered, she saw the man seated at the head of the conference table. Today, the man was not wearing a suit. He wore a simple shirt and black pants. His 1.88-meter-tall figure was extremely eye-catching as he sat there quietly. His aura was quiet and reserved, and he appeared distant. In terms of looks, figure, and even the calm and indifferent aura he exuded, even the school leaders and principals present, as well as those who were used to standing on high ground, were silently crushed by him. He was like a silent and disdainful person. That cold and slight smile clearly hid a clear alienation and indifference. Jean Wan looked at this man whom she had always been familiar with, but at this moment he suddenly seemed like a stranger. Her heart was instantly stung by bees. She was too used to Mo Jingshan's doting and giving in to her. This Mo Jingshan, who caused her to feel distant, really did seem a little unfamiliar. "President Mo, this is the scope of our T University's cooperation with various major educational institutions in the country in recent years. This includes the education industry." The school leaders were standing in front of a huge screen and pointing at a PowerPoint presentation detailing the various indicators of T University. The school leaders, who were used to domineering in front of the students, were now looking at the man sitting at the head of the conference table with sparkling eyes. Not only did T University's century-old library need to be rebuilt, but there were also various areas and channels related to the education industry that they hoped would be seen by local businessmen. Right now, they really wanted to seize the opportunity to cooperate with the MO Corporation in the education industry, so they had to use all their means to attract the attention of investors. The ongoing meeting did not stop because of Jean Wan's appearance. The school leader only glanced at Jean Wan. When he saw Professor Lin stand up and signal for Jin-Wan to come over, he understood her intentions. The meeting continued without a pause. Jin-Wan, come here. Professor Lin was a special professor at T University. He sat in the middle of the left side of the conference table, about 7 to 8 meters away from the head of the conference table. He beckoned Jin-Wan over. Jin-Wan brought the materials in her hands to Professor Lin. When she handed the folder to him, Professor Lin flipped through it and nodded in praise. He then turned back to look at her approvingly. Not bad. As expected, you're the most diligent in your studies. You brought all of my materials here without missing a single page. If it were someone else, who knows how many pages they would have missed. Jin-Wan felt that her mission was over. She used her gaze to ask the professor if she should leave now. Professor Lin did not reply. At this moment, the school leader happened to be speaking to him. He turned his head and entered the meeting state, not saying whether Jin-Wan should leave or not. Jin-Wan stood behind the professor. She raised her eyes and looked toward the head of the conference table. Ever since she entered, Mo Jingshan had only glanced at her once. It was a very ordinary glance, and he had not shifted his gaze toward her since. When she glanced toward him again, she saw that Mo Jingshan was currently reading a T University file that the school leader had eagerly handed to him. He was calmly flipping through it. His calm and indifferent attitude quickly made Jin-Wan realize that his attention was not placed on her. This man was really cold, unlike Jin-Wan. Although she appeared calm on the surface, her heart felt as though it had been scratched by a cat. It was painful, itchy, and stinging. Unfortunately, the person she was facing was a man who was much more skilled than her. As though sensing her gaze, Mo Jingshan only took a few glances before placing the file down. His indifferent gaze finally landed on her. The moment their eyes met, Jin-Wan's footsteps, which were about to leave the conference room, paused. She was not very clear about Mo Corporation's plans for this year. Perhaps Mo Jingshan's appearance at T University and his involvement in the education industry was part of their company's original plan. He had not bothered with her for a month. It couldn't be that his sudden appearance here was because of her. Back then, she had indeed said something she should not have. Her distrust had crossed his bottom line. But it had been an entire month. What exactly had he been doing this entire month? After not seeing her for a month, this man's posture was really at ease. Professor Lin's student came in to deliver the documents? If you're done, then leave. Seeing that Jin-Wan was still standing there, and that CEO Mo's attention seemed to be attracted by her, the principal suddenly spoke up, urging her to leave quickly. At this moment, Professor Lin also turned back to nod his thanks at Jin-Wan, indicating with his eyes that she could leave first. Jin-Wan silently nodded. From start to finish, she did not say a single word. She turned and walked out. Behind her, a school leader's voice came. That's right, Mo. You previously mentioned that the reason you invested in T University's century-old library was because there is someone very important to you here. Regardless of whether it is to you or to that person, this is truly a matter of great virtue. I wonder who exactly is it that you value so highly, Mo? The author's words. Chapter 224. The moment Jin-Wan arrived at the conference room, her expression froze. That day, she should not have been so conflicted over the matter. She should not have doubted and distrusted him. At that time, she really wanted to ask if she had left any traces on this blank piece of paper. Right now, could this be considered a form of indirect response? Was she very important? At the same time, Jin-Wan felt a familiar gaze from behind her. She stood in the same spot. She knew that this was the principal's conference room and that there were many school leaders present. She calmed herself down and quickly walked out. Feng Ling had been waiting for her outside. When she saw Jin-Wan come out, she immediately approached her. She used her gaze to ask if the person inside was Mr. Mo. Jin-Wan only nodded her head and went downstairs. The sky had already darkened. T-City's lanterns had just been lit, and the streetlights on T University's campus were somewhat far away. Jin-Wan said that she wanted to be alone for a while. Feng Ling found a spot far away where she would not disturb her. She watched as Jin-Wan paced back and forth on the field behind the campus. It was unknown what she was thinking about. About an hour later, The sky was getting darker and darker. Only the top floor of the teaching building was lit. Jin-won suddenly noticed that the lights in the conference room on the top floor had been turned off. She abruptly walked in through the back door. She saw that several school leaders had just come down and that Professor Lin was behind her. She approached to ask, "Professor, has the meeting ended? It's already past 8. You haven't returned to the dormitory yet?" Professor Lin looked at her in shock. "The wind is very strong tonight. Go back and rest early. Don't catch a cold. Has everyone gone downstairs?" Jin-won did not see Mo Jingshin's figure. "The investor has left. The school leaders and I extended the meeting by several minutes. Right now, the conference room is empty." "But who are you looking for?" Professor Lin sized her up. "Your father and I are old acquaintances, but I've been too busy these past few years. I don't know much about your G family's matters. COMO is also from High City. Could it be that you guys, he has already left?" Jin-won furrowed her brows. She did not deny Professor Lin's guess. Her words could be considered as a silent admission. Professor Lin immediately glanced at her again. He recalled that Mo Jingshin had specifically asked to look at T University's business management major. It seemed like it was not a coincidence, so it was because of Jin-won. Professor Lin smiled. "He just left not long ago. If you want to chase after him now, he probably just left the school gate. There's a traffic jam outside the school gate now, so his car shouldn't have left yet." After saying that, Professor Lin left without going overboard. He had no right to ask about the matters of young people, but because of Jin-won's existence, T University was able to attract such a large investor. This was truly a great contribution from Jin-won to T University and the library. Jin-won's reaction was to hesitate for 2 or 3 seconds before she suddenly turned and walked out. She ran all the way to the school gates and saw the cars parked outside. However, she did not know which one was Mo Jingshin's. He didn't drive his ghost to T-City. There was a subsidiary company of the Mo Corporation in T-City. He didn't know which company car or his spare car was. He had seen him drive a black off-road vehicle before, but that black off-road vehicle wasn't here. Jin-won looked at the parking lot outside the school and finally could not help picking up her cell phone to call Mo Jingshin. The call went through, but after a long time, no one picked up. In the end, the call was automatically hung up. After a long time, Jin-won did not hear any of the nearby cars ringing. In other words, Mo Jingshin had already left. He left just like that? Jin-won did not give up and called again, but no one picked up. She abruptly gripped her cell phone tightly in her palm, glaring at each car in the parking lot. "Very good, Mo Jingshin, your temper is really bad." Jin-won turned and walked back. Fong Ling saw that Jin-won did not seem to be able to find Mr. Mo and walked over from a distance. However, she saw Jin-won's unhappy expression. Fong Ling saw that there were no other students around and softly said, "Mrs. Mo, are you sure the person who came today is Mr. Mo? Where is he?" "I don't know." Hearing Jin-won's resentful tone, Fong Ling, Bai Wei went out alone tonight and met up with several friends she had interacted with in the workplace. When she returned, she was in a good mood and brought a few cans of beer with her. She knew that Jin-won did not drink, so she originally planned to drink with her. However, for the first time ever, Jin-won took 2 cans of beer from her bed. She sat down and began to drink, as though she was competing with the beer. What's wrong with her?" Bai Wei was astonished. She turned to look at Fong Ling in confusion. Fong Ling calmly replied, "She's probably angered." Who has the ability to anger her to this extent? Also, didn't she say that she can't drink? Should we try to persuade her? Forget it. Let her drink. After drinking, she can have a good sleep in the dormitory. There's no point in stopping her now. Fong Ling glanced at Jin-won. If she really wanted to drink right now, she could understand her feelings. As long as she did not step out of the dormitory tonight, she could drink however she wanted. Bai Wei saw that Jin-won had already finished the 2 cans of beer and turned to look at the other 2 cans in her bag. "Aren't you guys going to drink?" Jin-won's alcohol tolerance was not very good. She had only drunk 2 cans of beer with a low alcohol content, but her eyes were already slightly red. I bought the alcohol on the way. I only bought 4 cans. If you really want to drink to your heart's content, why don't we go to the bar opposite T University to drink together? Bai Wei saw that Ling Feifei was not around tonight. It was a rare opportunity for the 3 of them to drink and chat together. She directly suggested, that bar's management is not bad. There aren't any messy people. There are only 2 resident singers who sing all sorts of sad love songs. I've been there twice. Their singing is not bad, and the environment is good. There's also a wide variety of alcohol. All right, let's go. Jean Wan picked up the 3rd can of beer, opening it as she spoke. Seeing that Jean Wan's mood was clearly heightened due to the alcohol, Feng Ling directly said, "No, it's already past 9. Let's just drink a few cans in the dormitory. After drinking, we'll sleep." However, Jean Wan appeared as though she did not hear Feng Ling's words. She had already picked up her coat and put it on. She then sat by the bed to change her shoes. As she tied her shoelaces, she said, let's go. My treat." As she spoke, she glanced at Feng Ling, who clearly did not intend to let her go. "Let's go together. You'll follow me. What are you afraid of?" How could Feng Ling be afraid? If Jean Wan really wanted to go out, nothing would happen if she followed Jean Wan. Furthermore, in the past month, she did not know what Mr. Mo had done to the Su family in America. They had quietened down and would likely not extend their hands to Jean Wan. What Feng Ling was worried about was not Jean Wan's safety, but that Jean Wan had already drunk alcohol. If Mr. Mo was nearby and did not leave, if Mr. Mo knew that Jean Wan had drunk alcohol. Chapter 225. If you're in a bad mood, go out and relax. It's the same even if you don't drink. It's just relaxing. Bai Wei saw that the 2 of them were in a deadlock and decided to smooth things over. You're a woman. No matter what you do, you have to be able to face yourself. Don't take things too hard. It's good to go out and take a walk. It's much better than holding it all in. Jean Wan lowered her head and tied her shoelaces. She did not speak, but it was clear that she was indeed holding it in. Feng Ling's relationship with Jean Wan was likely getting closer and closer. There were many things that she could empathize with. Even though she remembered Xiao Mo's instructions, she truly felt that Jean Wan's current mood needed to be released. She had indeed held it in for a month. Today, it could be said that her emotions had been triggered. Then go. I'll accompany you. You mustn't drink any more. You've already drunk 3 cans. Feng Ling sighed slightly. However, the result was that Feng Ling had underestimated the waiters in a place like Leisure Bar. Even though Bai Wei and Jean Wan had originally only ordered a fruit plate and a bottle of fruit wine with a low alcohol content, they could not resist the recommendations of these people. In the end, they bought several bottles of wine that were said to be fruit-flavored. 1 red and 1 blue. Although they appeared to be fruit-flavored wines, the alcohol content was not particularly low. The result of mixing several types of wine together was easy to imagine. With Jean Wan's alcohol tolerance, in less than an hour, she closed her eyes and leaned against the sofa, unmoving. Feng Ling went to support her. Bai Wei sat by the side and sighed. No wonder Jean Wan said that there was someone at home who did not allow her to drink. As expected, her alcohol tolerance is too poor. Alcohol tolerance can be considered one of her weaknesses. Tomorrow when she wakes up, don't laugh at her. Otherwise, based on her recent mood, it's very easy for her heart to shatter into pieces. Feng Ling saw Jean Wan's drunken appearance and half teased and half helplessly helped her up. Bai Wei also had a teasing smile. Is this a relationship problem? I've seen it many times. Women who are usually so impressive in the workplace, once they encounter a relationship problem, they all become like this. I can understand. I definitely won't laugh at her. Feng Ling did not continue speaking with her. She supported Jean Wan and turned to walk out. Jean Wan was really drunk, and it was the first time she was drunk to this extent. She was like a puddle of mud and had to be supported by Feng Ling to steady herself. This bar was located in the basement. They needed to take the elevator to reach it. She had just helped Jean Wan to the elevator when Jean Wan clutched her chest and leaned her head against Feng Ling's shoulder. Her expression was distressed as she said, I've never seen a man with such a temper. Feng Ling, if he doesn't want to care about me anymore, then don't come to T-City. Feng Ling, he still ignores me after coming to T-City. I've already called him, but he won't pick up. He wasn't going to take it. He must have been sitting in one of the cars. Feng Ling, why don't we have a quarrel if you dare? You're giving me the cold shoulder. Do you really think that just because I always feel that I'm in the wrong, I'll soften my temper and cling to you? Did he think he was the Buddha? Did he think that I, Jin Wan, was a monkey in his palm that would never be able to escape and that everything was under his control? Let me tell you, I jumped out in my previous life. Feng Ling. Right now, Feng Ling could not be bothered with Jin Wan's incoherent drunken words. She could only silently watch the elevator doors that had been open for half a minute. Her scalp turned numb as she stared at the tall and broad man inside. Jin Wan realized that the elevator doors had opened, but Feng Ling had yet to pull her in. She narrowed her eyes and absent-mindedly saw a man standing inside. She narrowed her eyes and moved closer to take a look. Feng Ling subconsciously rushed to help her in. Jin Wan still staggered and almost fell into the elevator. Feng Ling rushed to hold her back. Mrs. M. However, as Jin Wan was being supported, she raised her eyes to look at the man in the elevator. From this distance, the man in front of her was truly handsome to the point of causing one's hair to stand on end. Did she really drink too much? The man who previously refused to talk to her, refused to see her, and refused to pick up her calls seemed to be standing right in front of her. Jin Wan looked at the man in front of her who was as tall as a jade tree. His eyes were cold, his nose was high, and his face was so handsome that it was like the work of the gods. His lower body was still clad in black trousers, which were long and slender. He wore a pure white shirt that was not fully buttoned, revealing his collarbone. He was sexy and exuded an aura of abstinence, causing one to be mesmerized. He just stood there, cold, noble, and distant. As Jin Wan continued to stare at him drunkenly, the man just coldly lifted his eyelids, lightly swept his gaze over the coat Jin Wan was wearing, and finally stopped on her face. His gaze was unreasonably calm, deep and calm. He just stared at her. Jin Wan's coat was put on by Feng Ling when she pulled her up from the sofa. Right now, it looked a little messy. Her hair was also loose and tangled around her neck, making her skin look fairer and more delicate. Her cheeks were also much redder from the alcohol. Mr. Mo, Feng Ling supported Jin Wan with some awkwardness. She did not expect that after accompanying Jin Wan to indulge for the first time, she would be caught by Mo Jingshan. It seemed like Mo Jingshan had always been watching Jin Wan's every move. In this month, no matter where Jin Wan was or what she was doing, even if Feng Ling did not report it, he would still know. The man coldly stood in the elevator and did not speak. Mrs. Mo's feelings have been suppressed for a month. Today, you finally came, but your attitude dug out all the pain in her heart. About her drinking today, Feng Ling was explaining when Jin Wan suddenly turned to look at Feng Ling. She tilted her head and looked at her, saying unhappily, Feng Ling, why don't you pretend to be a man again? After I jump out of Mo Jingshan's palm, how about marrying you? Anyway, you're so handsome and skilled, why don't we make do with each other? Feng Ling. In an instant, Jin Wan was directly thrown into the arms of the man in the elevator by Feng Ling. Her feet were unsteady, and her nose bumped against the man's chest. She immediately frowned in pain and raised her hand to tug at the man's clothes. She grabbed the corner of his clothes with both hands and struggled to stand firm. Then she raised her hand to rub her nose and turned to look at Feng Ling. Feng Ling, why did you push me? Feng Ling looked at Jin Wan, who was now really drunk and unconscious, and her back tightened because of Mo Jingshan's displeased and cold eyes. She lowered her voice and said, Mrs. Mo, if you're drunk, quickly close your eyes and sleep. Don't talk. Chapter 226. As Jin Wan spoke, she reached behind her, muttering, I can't stand properly right now. Feng Ling, come and support me. It's not good to keep leaning on someone else. Jin Wan was so drunk that she could not be stopped. What did she mean by someone else? Right now, she was leaning on her husband, Mo Jingshan, but right now, she was seriously drunk. Her alcohol tolerance was poor to begin with, And she drank so much tonight. Jinwan had most likely never drunk so much in her entire life. Feng Ling? Seeing that Feng Ling did not speak, Jinwan could only prop herself up and turn around to pull her up. The moment she turned around, she could not stand properly. Her legs weakened, and she fell to the side, knocking into the man beside her. Almost at the same time, her waist was held down by the man's arm. In an instant, his breath entered Jinwan's nose. It was a clear and clean scent that she was familiar with. She barely managed to hold onto his clothes. She lowered her head to look at his elegant white shirt and well-ironed trousers. She muttered, "Sorry? I drank too much. I couldn't stand properly." As she spoke, she tried to move away from his embrace. However, the man did not let go. His cold eyes stared at her. He watched her drunken little face and pressed her firmly into his embrace. "I'm very sorry." Jinwan thought that she had hurt him, and that was why he did not let go of her. She quickly apologized. After speaking, she turned to speak to Feng Ling. "Feng Ling, did you not drink tonight? Let's head back to the dormitory. Why isn't Bai Wei with us? Did she fall asleep on the sofa?" Feng Ling thought in her heart, "You should worry about yourself first. Bai Wei isn't drunk. She'll be back in a while," Feng Ling replied to prevent Jinwan from persistently asking. Jinwan nodded. She did not notice when the elevator doors closed. When the elevator doors opened again, she saw that Feng Ling had suddenly turned around to leave. She actually had no intention of accompanying her back. "Hey, where are you going?" Before Jinwan could follow him out, she lost her balance and was pulled back by the man behind her. The moment she bumped into his embrace, Jinwan turned back with a confused expression. She subconsciously smiled at him. "Thank you." As she spoke, she was about to push him away. She had to catch up with Feng Ling recently. Feng Ling had been inseparable from her. Something must have happened for her to suddenly leave alone in the middle of the night. She felt that she had to follow up to take a look. However, after struggling for a long time, she could not escape from his embrace. Jinwan was about to speak when she abruptly heard the man's calm voice ring by her ears. "Stand firm." Jinwan was startled and turned to look at him. However, before she could see clearly, the man brought her out of the elevator. Jinwan was slightly dazed. She wanted to struggle but could not. She could only think that this person was too similar to Mo Jingxian. The night breeze outside the bar was slightly chilly. Jinwan was brought into the car by the man. Her head leaned against the car window weakly. The car door was already locked. She struggled futilely against the window, muttering softly, "I'm telling you, kidnapping is against the law. Hurry and let me out of the car, or else my Feng Ling won't let you off." The man did not speak and had already started the car. Jinwan's eyes were half closed. Her head hurt and she wanted to sleep. However, she was afraid that she would be kidnapped again. She tried her best to maintain a sliver of consciousness to pay attention to the environment outside the car. However, her vision was blurry and she could not see anything clearly. It was only when the car stopped at the condominium near T University that she looked out in astonishment. Right now, even the human traffickers knew so much about her? He even knew where the condominium she rarely stayed in was? "I want to return to the dormitory. I don't want to return here." Jinwan furrowed her brows. Her hand slammed hard against the car window. "I don't want to return here. I don't want to." However, the car door had already opened. The man unbuckled her seatbelt and lowered his eyes to look at her. His voice was low and cold. "If you don't want to return here, where do you want to go? In any case, I'm not going back here." The moment Jinwan thought back to the luggage she saw when she returned that day, her heart was filled with anger. "You want me to bring you back to the dormitory? I'll go back to the dormitory myself." "It's not up to you. Get out." Jinwan was about to say no when the man had already gotten out of the car and walked around the car. He opened the door and carried her out. Jinwan raised her hand to push him away, but it was as though the man completely knew what she was going to do next. No matter if she suddenly raised her arm or leg, he was able to accurately avoid them. At the same time, he pressed her down and locked her firmly in his embrace. Jinwan raised her eyes to glare at him. The wind outside the car was slightly chilly. For a second, her mind was clear. Suddenly, she saw the man's face clearly. Because she was in his embrace, she could smell the man's cool and stern scent. She stopped moving. Was it a dream? Or a hallucination? Didn't he refuse to pick up her calls? But right now, how could Jinwan care about that? The moment she saw the man clearly, she raised her hand to push him away. Go away. The man lowered his head, one hand supporting the back of her head to prevent her from falling back. His other hand threaded through her hair. His voice was soft and gentle, but also like an unhappy warning. Behave yourself. Jinwan pretended not to hear him and pushed him again. In the end, he suddenly carried her horizontally. Her entire body was lifted up by his waist. The moment her feet were in the air, she instinctively cried out. Her two hands clung tightly to his neck. Then she heard the man's low chuckle. However, this chuckle did not sound happy or angry. It was as though he was always aware of her trump card. Without much effort, he easily subdued her, who was as drunk as mud, and even forced her to cling to his body. You'd rather squat by the window like a wronged cat than make a call to say that you miss me. Mrs. M.O., you're really stubborn. The man's deep, calm, and dark eyes watched her. He said coldly with a forced smile, in the afternoon, you stood in the school's conference room and peeked at me. While I was visiting the subsidiary company, you were able to drink yourself into this state. You're really taking advantage of the fact that I can't hit or scold you. Even when I was angry, I couldn't bear to leave you hanging. You've got me, haven't you? Jinwan's hands were wrapped around his neck. Subconsciously, she was afraid of falling. Hearing his words, she immediately glared at him. She did not care if he was hallucinating or real. She said angrily, "Who says I'm wronged? I eat well and sleep well in T University. I don't feel wronged at all." The night was cold and windy. Mo Jingshan did not say anything more to the stubborn, drunken little woman in his arms. He directly carried her into the condo. Chapter 227. Was this the real Mo Jingshan or something else? This dream was a little too realistic. She stood up out of habit, swaying as she stood by the sofa. She raised her head to look at the man who was a head taller than her. Was it a dream? As she spoke, she reached out to pinch the man's face. Mo Jingshan did not dodge. However, just as her hand was about to touch his face, he caught it with one hand and pulled it down. He held it in his hand and used his strength to support her, preventing her from falling back. And it's a dream. The man's voice was low and cold. She could not hear his emotions. Jinwan stood in front of him, widening her drunken eyes as she tried her best to look at him. After staring for a long time, she suddenly smiled. Forget it, forget it. Who cared if it was a dream or an illusion? In any case, it wasn't the real Mo Jingshan. She could scold him however she wanted. It was just an illusion. He definitely wouldn't mind. Mo Jingshan. Jinwan's temper immediately flared up. She planned to show off her might to the illusion in front of her and vent out the anger she had accumulated over the past month. She suddenly pointed at his nose, raising her drunken little face and misty eyes to glare at him. You tortoise bastard. The man's handsome brows rose slightly. You know how to scold people? What do you mean I know how to scold people? In the past, when this old lady quarreled with others and scolded them, you didn't see it. Why do all the rich young ladies in Haicheng hate me so much? Isn't it because back then, they all came to provoke me and ended up being scolded until their eyes turned red? It's not like you don't know what kind of personality I had in the past. Jinwan abruptly stood on her tiptoes, raising her hand to tug on his collar. She pursed her lips and began her long journey of venting her frustrations. For you, I nearly pulled out all the thorns on my body. For our marriage, I worked hard to do everything. I've never doubted you. The night before, I was frightened in the underground bar. My panic turned to despair. It was all because of that person I didn't know. The night after, I found out that it was all because of your ex-fiancé. Was I supposed to smile and say it's fine, that I didn't mind? Do you think I have no conscience? Let me tell you, if I, Jinwan, did not have a conscience, I would never stick to you like this in this lifetime. So what if it's a divorce? I can go far away. But I've staked everything I have on you, Mo Jingshan. I've given you everything. My everything. My everything. You are indeed unconditionally good to me, but apart from that, you are an abyss that I can't even touch. I don't even know how far away I am from your heart. The wound on Jinwan's forehead had long healed. Her forehead, which was covered by her bangs, was smooth and clean. It was impossible to tell what she had experienced in the underground bar a month ago. The man's hand brushed aside her slightly sweaty bangs. She suddenly turned her head and bit down on his finger. As she bit down, she thought that it was a dream anyway. It didn't hurt, and neither did he. She had vented all her anger. She had scolded him, and tomorrow, she would be a good man again. He didn't struggle free. Instead, he reached out an arm to steady her body and let her bite him. The taste of blood overflowed from her mouth. Jinwan finally stopped. She suddenly muttered softly, as though she was muttering to herself, I should have changed my life from the very beginning. I must have lost my mind. Otherwise, why would I willingly submit to the siege you drew and be blocked by a man like you who is addicted to poppies? I'm wrong because I can't control my heart calmly. I'm wrong because I care too much about you, right? You. The back of Jinwan's head was held. The man's lips pressed down, blocking her lips. Jinwan was stunned. Just as she was about to step back, the hand on the back of her head firmly restrained her. The force that restrained her was not gentle. Although it could not be said to be rough, it was much stronger than usual. She was really too drunk. After struggling for a while, she felt tired. The pain and numbness on her lips did not allow her to react. How could there be such a clear sensation in a dream? After that, she fell asleep in a daze. She didn't even know how she fell asleep. Jinwan did not sleep well. In less than half an hour, she had a bunch of messy nightmares. She frowned and suddenly opened her eyes in shock. The glaring light in the room made her close her eyes again. However, just a glance was enough for her to clearly see the man's handsome face. She realized that she seemed to be lying on the sofa. Mo Jingshan was still there in her dream. You're awake? Do you have a headache? The man's voice fell by her ear. Hearing this voice, which was frighteningly real, Jinwan's eyelashes trembled. She opened her misty eyes again and looked at the man's face in a trance. She reached out to touch his face to see if the illusion would suddenly disappear. When she reached out, the man's palm suddenly held her waist. Jinwan was brought to sit on his lap. She pressed her head against his shoulder. She tried to sit up, but her head still drooped little by little on his shoulder. Mo Jingshan, she said softly. In the future, let's not quarrel, all right? Jinwan buried her face in his neck. Her voice was low and soft. The man's hand paused on the top of her head. After a moment, he looked at her mildly. Are you sober or still drunk? Can you recognize if I'm an illusion or if I'm your husband? Jinwan buried her face deeper into his neck. I don't know. Mo Jingshan narrowed his eyes and looked at her unkindly. He raised his hand to encircle the little woman who had vented her anger with the help of the alcohol. He said indifferently, Then let's talk when you're sober. I don't talk to drunkards. Jinwan, she abruptly tried to leave his lap, but the man held her down and did not let her move. You're so drunk, yet you still have the strength to struggle. It seems like the 1 month I gave you wasn't enough time to calm down. Earlier, you said you wouldn't quarrel, but now you're keeping a distance with me with a dark face? Let go of me. I want to go down. Reason? Do. Jinwan raised her half-drunk and half-sober eyes. Her slightly disheveled hair stuck to her cheeks. Her earlier resentful expression was now tinged with awkwardness. Her lips moved twice before she spat out a few stiff words. You stared at me. As she spoke, she tried to shift her butt on his lap. Mo Jingshan lowered his head to look at the woman's face in his arms. His eyes were as deep as the ocean in the silent night. His soft kisses landed on her soft hair. We haven't seen each other for more than a month. If you move around again, it won't be as simple as hurting you. Chapter 228. Now that he had said this, if she continued to move on his lap, she would be an idiot. Seeing that she had become obedient, Emo Jingshan rubbed her hair as though he was in a good mood. You've already vented your anger. You've also said that you won't fight anymore. Now, does that hedgehog heart of yours that has its thorns removed feel better? Jinwan did not speak. Her entire body senses were focused on the area below her. She was clearly not moving, but why was it still becoming more and more uncomfortable? Little heartless, you still know that I'm angry at you for being heartless. Yet, you're using your drunkenness to shout so much at me. Do you think this is a competition of loudness? Does louder mean you're right? The man's slender fingers weaved through her hair and finally landed on her shoulders. His hand gripped the back of her neck, forcing her to raise her head to look at his face. Although his voice was slightly lowered, as though he was coaxing her, his indifferent gaze made her realize that if she was not drunk and not clear-headed enough, he would most likely have pressed her down on the bed to reason with her. However, right now, Jinwan could not tell what reason he wanted to reason with her. Her head was dizzy. Aside from the man's face being particularly clear, she really could not differentiate between north, south, east, and west. However, seeing that she was currently so drunk, he did not plan on bickering with her anymore. If he got drunk, he would be able to avoid facing the storm of all kinds of persuasive words and instigation. It seemed like drinking wasn't a bad thing. When Jinwan woke up, the sky outside the window was already bright. Hangovers were truly too torturous. Yet, there were so many people who liked to stay drunk all night. Every time she woke up drunk, her head would hurt like hell. She sat up and lifted the blankets to discover that she was sleeping on the bed in the condo's bedroom. Of the 2 pillows on the bed, only her side had traces of being slept on, and only her side of the blankets had been lifted. Last night, Jinwan's memories were slightly blurry. She could only vaguely remember some vague impressions. She raised her hand to rub her head and then grabbed her hair. She tried hard to recall but could not figure out if it was a hallucination or reality. She got off the bed and opened the closet to change. She then walked out of the bedroom to look at the empty living room. Looking at the sky outside the window, it should be at least 7 o'clock. If it was just a hallucination, how on earth did she return to the apartment last night? Feng Ling knew that she didn't want to come back to live, so she couldn't take the initiative to send her here. However, if it wasn't an illusion, she would still be the only one in the apartment. The silence made her wonder if she had accidentally entered an isolated world. There was no sound at all. Jinwan was slightly hungry. She went to the kitchen to open the refrigerator and saw that it was still filled with the food that the auntie had sent over 2 days ago. She was not interested in the fruits and food inside. She took out a bottle of yogurt, closed the refrigerator door, opened the lid, and walked out expressionlessly. When he walked back to the sofa in the living room, he suddenly stopped and saw a glass cup on the coffee table. He walked over and picked up the cup. There was still half a cup of water in it. He brought it to his nose and sniffed it. It was the smell of hangover tea. She turned to look at the shirt on the sofa. It was the white shirt that the man had changed out of before he left. It looked very clean, but when she picked it up and took a careful sniff, she could still smell the scent of alcohol on it, as well as the refreshing morning scent that only Emo Jingshan had. It was Emo Jingshan's shirt. It was also the half cup of hangover tea that Emo Jingshan had fed her before she went to bed. When she turned back, she saw that there was an extra pair of indoor slippers by the door. They were gray. The auntie had previously tidied them up, but Emo Jingshan had skillfully taken them out and put them on. Another pair of pink indoor slippers was currently being worn by her feet. Some of her drunken memories resurfaced bit by bit. Jinwan abruptly turned around and walked around the apartment. Although the apartment was as quiet and empty as ever, and it was indeed too big for her to live alone, she saw that there was an extra set of men's razors and a mint-flavored bottle of aftershave in the bathroom. After walking around, Jinwan returned and sat on the sofa. She leaned back and rested her head on the back of the sofa, lost in thought. So what happened last night was real. What did she say to Emo Jingshan last night? She even seemed to have tugged on his collar and angrily scolded him. What exactly did she scold? He had left traces of himself in this apartment. Did this mean that he was really not going to hold it against her anymore? But he was not around this early in the morning. It couldn't be that she had scolded him too much last night and angered him away, right? Jinwan pressed her forehead, her eyes staring at the half cup of hangover tea on the coffee table. After thinking for a moment, she suddenly picked up her phone to take a look. There was no call or message. By the time Jinwan left the apartment, it was already past 8 o'clock. Professor Lin's daily class started at 8 o'clock. It was already late, and she did not have the time to buy breakfast. She headed straight for T University. When she rushed to the classroom, Professor Lin was in the middle of teaching. He only glanced at her and did not ask anything, indicating for her to quickly sit down. Usually, Professor Lin was very strict with these hedonistic young masters. No one was allowed to be late. If they were late more than 3 times, they could forget about staying here. However, today, he did not say anything and actually allowed Jinwan to sit down. "You were so drunk last night. I thought you would sleep the entire day," Bai Wei said softly by the side when Jinwan sat down. If she did not mention this, Jinwan would have forgotten that she went out to drink with Bai Wei last night. Afterward, she was so drunk that she almost fainted. It seemed like it was Feng Ling who came to support her. What happened after that? It couldn't be that she was caught by Mo Jingshan in the act while she was still in that bar, could it? "I drank the hangover tea last night and sobered up a little. My biological clock is very punctual. I wake up when it's time." Jinwan did not explain further and calmly replied. "Didn't Feng Ling leave with you last night? The two of you didn't return to the dormitory yesterday. Now that you're here, where's Feng Ling?" Jinwan glanced at the seat where Feng Ling usually sat. As expected, it was empty. Could it be that Feng Ling thought that she would be with Mo Jingshan for the past 2 days and did not continue following her? "I don't know. I'll give her a call in a while to ask." Jinwan shifted her gaze away from the seat. Her heart was slightly hesitant. However, in her impression, Feng Ling always followed through with her actions. She was also very reliable. Even if she thought that she would be at Mo Jingshan's place and did not come to class, she would at least give Jinwan a call or send her a message. Chapter 229. In the condo, Mo Jingshan looked at the shirt Jinwan had folded for him, the glass cup she had washed, and the shaver she had placed in the bathroom cabinet. The corners of his lips turned up slightly. Last night, Jinwan was still drunk, acting as though she had been holding it in for a month. Today, she obediently tidied up the traces he had left behind. This little woman was really becoming more and more duplicitous. Mo Jingshan tugged open the top few buttons of his shirt, glanced at the sky outside the window, and chuckled softly. At this moment, his phone received a message. He glanced at it. "Nanheng, in T-City?" Mo Jingshan replied with one word, N. "Nanheng, in that condo or somewhere else?" Mo Jingshan casually replied, "Condo." In less than half an hour, Nanheng drove over, directly knocking on the door and entering. Mo Jingshan looked at his travel-worn appearance. It was clear that he had driven across the province overnight. His entire person exuded a cold and dispirited aura. The moment he entered, he went inside to find water to drink. "Why did you come in such a hurry? What's the matter?" Mo Jingshan calmly glanced at her. After drinking a glass of water, Nanheng put down the glass in his hand, speaking, "Back when Feng Ling completed a mission for 11 Base in America, she once intercepted several smuggled military vehicles belonging to the New York Mafia. Those people from the Mafia have been tracking her whereabouts for the past 2 years. My men found out that they have been making some movements in the country recently, and in the past 2 days, they have been moving toward T-City. I'm afraid Feng Ling's whereabouts have already been tracked." Mo Jingshan coldly raised his eyelids, watching him. "It's all old grudges formed with 11 Base. It's related to the underground arms trade in New York and Los Angeles. Their target is Feng Ling, and it won't affect your woman." Nanheng rushed over overnight. He did not sleep the entire night. His expression was dark as he coughed. But for the next few days, it's best if Feng Ling doesn't follow Jinwan. If they find out that Jinwan is close to her, it won't be a good thing. Mo Jingshan's cold brows moved slightly. The New York Mafia's vengeance has always targeted a specific person. With their abilities, they won't be able to cause trouble in the country. They won't dare to implicate more people in the country's territory. Nanheng nodded. Fong Ling's matter is only related to the base mission she completed. It has nothing to do with what you did in the United States a few years ago. Keep an eye on Jinwan. I don't need your help here. I know what I'm doing. Be careful. Mo Jingshan said calmly, when the time is right, let's send those people who frequently set up obstacles in the United States to the next world. These years, they have also committed many evil deeds. When the time is right, we should personally send them on their way. After a moment of silence, Nanheng said, Did you return to America a few days ago? Mo Jingshan was expressionless. He only listened and did not respond. The news I got from the front line is that the old man of the Su family is very angry with you. What about it? Did the thing that happened to Jinwan a month ago really touch your bottom line? Nanheng's cold and seductive eyes contained a trace of mockery. I don't believe it if you say that Elder Su didn't have any agreement with your father back then. In the end, he thought that he had played a big game, but he didn't know that the manipulator behind the scenes had long been replaced by you. Back then, not only did you break off the engagement with his precious granddaughter, but you also restricted all aspects of the Su family. In the past 2 years, he was also very dumbfounded. Even if the Su family's influence is widespread in the United States, they clearly do not intend to openly clash with you. I'm curious, what exactly did you do in America last month? That night, Elder Su was sent to the emergency room in a fit of anger. Thankfully, his life is very tough, and he returned after staying in the hospital for 4 days. But recently, the Su family seems to be closing the country to guard against death. Are you really going to kill his precious granddaughter to avenge Jinwan? Mo Jingshan's smile was calm, as though the manipulator behind the scenes like an executioner that Nanheng spoke of was not him. His tone was calm. I didn't do anything. I only let him see the pros and cons of the entire matter. If he plans to play a joke with the fate of the entire Su family, I naturally don't mind playing a joke with him. Nanheng raised his brows. He turned to look at the slightly empty apartment. It was clear that no one came here often. He chuckled. It's already been so long. Don't tell me that Jinwan is still angry? Mo Jingshan's gaze was cold. You can scram now. Nanheng glanced at the time. Right now was indeed not a good time to tease his brother. He had driven here through the night. Time was too tight. Mo Jingshan was an expert who did not shed a single drop of blood. From the beginning until now, aside from the fiancé who had only existed for a year due to Mo Xiao's interference, he had not missed a single step. For him, perhaps only Jinwan, who had entered his life from the beginning and gradually rampaged in his life, was the only accident. Downstairs, several security guards on duty stood ramrod straight in front of the apartment. Nanheng walked over, took out his phone, and showed them a photo of a single person. This short-haired, tall, and skinny woman often comes and goes here. After last night, have you seen her? When the security guards saw the photo, they immediately recognized her as the person who often accompanied Miss G in and out of this apartment. 2 days ago, I saw her come back with Miss G, but not yesterday. I haven't seen her the entire day. Hearing these words, Nanheng's gaze turned cold. He took long strides, his expression cold as he walked out. The next day, Jinwan stayed at T University as usual. Yesterday, she did not receive any news from Fong Ling, nor did she pick up her calls. If it were not for the fact that Professor Lin was about to conduct a random test on this batch of students, Jinwan would have returned to the apartment last night to take a look. Previously, when Fong Ling did not live with her, Fong Ling had a very suitable residence near the apartment. It was located in a residential area that was not too crowded. After another day of classes, Jinwan called Fong Ling, but she still did not pick up. She decided to leave T University and head to the residential area where Fong Ling had stayed for a few days to take a look. For the past month or so, she had suddenly lost contact with the person who was always by her side. On one hand, Jinwan was not used to it, and on the other hand, she was worried that something had happened to Fong Ling. That residential area was not far from her apartment. It was only a bus stop away. Jinwan walked there and did not take a taxi. However, from this intersection to the residential area, she had to go around a row of buildings. In the middle, there was a small alley between the buildings. Feng Ling had once brought Jin Wan through that alley. Chapter 230. Inside, a man could be heard cursing in fluent American English. Although Jin Wan didn't hear them clearly, she heard a word or two. With her English level, she could certainly understand them. She immediately leaned against the entrance of the alley and carefully looked in. She immediately saw Feng Ling standing against the wall. In front of her were two foreign men, tall and strong. The two men seemed to have surrounded her. One of them was holding a knife about the size of a watermelon, and the other was holding a long black electric baton. The two of them completely blocked Feng Ling. Seeing this, Jin Wan immediately withdrew her head, leaned against the entrance of the alley, and held her breath so as not to alarm the two men inside. When she saw Feng Ling being blocked by the two men, although she seemed to be standing steadily against the wall, her clothes were untidy, her short hair was slightly messy, and there were some bloodstains on her face. She didn't know where she was cut or what happened. In short, she must have been injured. Feng Ling didn't seem to have any weapons in her hands. No matter how good she was at fighting, she couldn't gain the upper hand. No matter how she was blocked by the two foreign men, Feng Ling probably hadn't contacted her since yesterday. Something big must have happened. The two men continued to curse inside. After a few words, suddenly there was the sound of fighting. Jin Wan listened for a while. Whether it was a hand-to-hand fight or a weapon, Jin Wan's heart was in her throat when she heard the sound inside. She suddenly looked up at a car parked across the alley. She didn't know if it was the accomplice of the two foreign men. The background of Feng Ling and the American 11 base was quite complicated. If Jin Wan called the police now, it might cause trouble for Feng Ling. She held her cell phone, paused on the call, and suddenly looked at a baseball equipment store on the first floor of the building. Her eyes lit up and she walked over. Feng Ling was confronting the two men. The battle had not stopped. Since yesterday, she had been avoiding the two men from the American Mafia, but in the end, she was still trapped here. Both of her arms were injured in the fight just now. Although it was not serious, there was still blood dripping down her arms. When one of the men scolded her again, her eyes sharpened, and with a roundhouse kick, she kicked the man with the knife to the ground. Before he stood up, he was about to fight the other man with the stun baton, but the stun baton in his hand was a very strong weapon. If she was electrocuted, half of her body would be numb for 2 days. In the confrontation, the man who had just been kicked down raised a knife and slashed at her head. Feng Ling nimbly raised her hand and grabbed his wrist. With a sharp twist, she heard the sound of his wrist dislocating. The foreign man, who was much taller than her, immediately cried out in pain. Feng Ling expressionlessly raised her foot and kicked him. However, at this moment, the other man directly stabbed her waist with the electric baton, and half of Feng Ling's body was instantly numb. Although she suddenly turned around to avoid it and was about to fight back, her movements were still a little slower because of the electric shock. The man took the opportunity to kick her in the stomach. Feng Ling bent over to avoid it, but the man suddenly pulled up the slightly longer short hair on her head. F***. All kinds of curses rang in her ears, and Feng Ling's scalp ached from the pulling. No matter how much strength she had used up a lot of her strength. She was trying to find a way to retreat from this man's hand when she suddenly noticed a figure appearing at the entrance of the alley from the corner of her eye. Feng Ling suddenly smiled at the two foreign men. The corner of her mouth was stained with blood. In the dim alley, her smile was a little cold and ruthless. When Feng Ling successfully attracted all the attention and suspicion of the two men, suddenly, with two bangs, the two men were hit on the back of their heads. Before they had time to turn their heads to look, they were hit by the baseball bat and fell to the ground. Dizzy and unable to stand firm, Feng Ling took the opportunity to stand up, subdued the two of them, and pressed them to the ground. "Thank you." When pressing the two men down, Feng Ling ignored the blood on her body and turned her head to look at Jin Wan, who was holding a baseball bat in her hand. Jin Wan held the baseball bat tightly and quickly stepped forward, looking at the blood on Feng Ling's face and body with concern. She saw that Feng Ling had only been hit on the cheek. The other party had hit her so hard that her cheek was swollen and the corner of her mouth was stained with blood. She reached out to take Feng Ling's arm. "How are you? Are your injuries serious?" "I'm fine. It's just a minor injury. Feng Ling didn't push Jinwan's hand away but used her other hand to hit the back of the two men's necks. After being hit hard by the baseball bat and hit on the most vulnerable part of the neck, the two foreign men fainted and lay on the ground motionless. With Jinwan's support, Feng Ling stood up. Seeing that Feng Ling didn't seem to be seriously injured, Jinwan's tense heart finally relaxed a little. What's wrong with these two people? Do you have enemies in the United States? Enemies? Feng Ling glanced at the two men on the ground. Sort of. When I was still in 11 base, I did a lot of missions and made a lot of enemies. You're seriously injured. Let's get out of here first. Jinwan pulled her hand hard again, wanting to take the injured Feng Ling away from this place. However, as soon as she exerted force, although Feng Ling didn't make a sound, she obviously frowned in pain. Jinwan abruptly let go of her hand, saw the blood on her palm, and then looked at Feng Ling's black shirt, which couldn't see the color of the blood. Is the injury on your arm very serious? Jinwan threw the baseball bat in her hand out and held her with both hands. Let's go to the hospital to stop the bleeding first. Before Feng Ling could say that she was fine, she had been forcibly taken out of the alley by Jinwan. However, just as the two of them ran out of the alley, in the car parked in front of them, an accomplice who was also tall and strong suddenly opened the door and got out of the car. He held the same black electric baton in his hand and rushed toward them with a fierce look, cursing violently. Watch out! At the moment when the man swung the electric baton, Jinwan and Feng Ling shouted almost at the same time. Jinwan was about to pull the injured Feng Ling back, but Feng Ling instinctively pulled Jinwan behind her, but the pain in her arm couldn't be ignored. The pain from the electric shock was still there. She wanted to push the man back, but her movements were still slower than usual for 2 or 3 seconds. In these 2 or 3 seconds, the man seized the opportunity and was about to reach out his other hand to restrain her. Chapter 231. They definitely couldn't go into the alley. Jinwan pulled her to run to the other side, but the other party didn't intend to waste any time. Instead of chasing after them, he suddenly returned to the car and drove after them. Whether it was to chase after them or to bump into them, they didn't know. Mrs. Mo, you go first. Feng Ling suddenly paused. She did not plan to implicate Jinwan. Why would I leave? I'm not a brother from your training base, so I don't know what sacrifice is, or what morality is. But in my eyes, you're already a good friend. How can I leave? As Jinwan ran, she tugged hard at Feng Ling, preventing her from waving her hand away. Let's run first. There's an alley ahead. His car can't drive into it. We'll think of a way after we get in. Seeing Jinwan's insistence, Feng Ling ran a few steps and felt that her numb body really needed at least a day or two to recover from the electric shock. She couldn't run as fast as usual. Just as the two of them were about to run to the other alley Jinwan mentioned, suddenly, a black Jeep galloped from the road in front of them at a fast speed, and the moment it came to a stop in front of them with a screech. Feng Ling and Jinwan looked up only to see that the back door of the Jeep in front of them was opened from the inside out. Nan Heng, who was in the driver's seat, didn't explain at all. He just glanced at the blood on Feng Ling's face and said coldly, "Get in the car." Feng Ling's expression froze, and Jinwan quickly helped her into the car. When Feng Ling sat in the car and saw that Jinwan hadn't come up, she rushed to pull her. "Mrs. Mo, come." Jinwan also got in the car, and the door closed with a bang. This sound isolated the sound of the engine of the car outside, and the tense atmosphere in the air finally relaxed a little. Before she could ask what was going on, Jinwan sat by Feng Ling's side and tugged at her sleeve. "You're bleeding a lot. Do you want to go to the hospital to stop the bleeding or go somewhere else?" "She can't go to the hospital." Without waiting for Feng Ling to speak, Nan Heng, who was driving, said coldly, "Take her to my place. I have hemostatic medicine and gauze. Jinwan, help her bandage." "Do you have a place to stay in T-City?" Jinwan turned to look at Nan Heng. "Is it far?" "My apartment is close to here. Just ask her to go to my place." "Forget about you. You can't go with me now, lest you get into trouble." Nan Heng coldly spat out these words and glanced at Jinwan through the rearview mirror. "Why were you there just now?" If something like this happens again, remember to run first, okay? Otherwise, if something happens to you, I'm afraid your man will chase me to the Pacific Ocean. I won't be able to live in peace for the rest of my life. Jin Wan didn't explain to him but continued to look at Feng Ling with concern. Seeing that Feng Ling's expression didn't change, she didn't seem to be surprised by the fact that they were chased earlier. She just didn't say anything. Jin Wan gently stroked her body. Are you hurt anywhere else? Don't just stay silent. Tell me where it hurts. If it's too serious, just going home to bandage it won't do. You still have to go to the hospital for an injection. Feng Ling shook her head at Jin Wan, indicating that she was fine and there was no need to worry. Jin Wan suddenly noticed that there were several cars driving in the opposite direction of them. The cars immediately surrounded the car driven by the foreign man. Right now, she had no time to pay attention to the situation outside the car. Jin Wan took out a wet towel from her bag to wipe the blood off Feng Ling's face. Seeing that Feng Ling's face was very pale, she immediately frowned. Someone actually dares to commit murder in broad daylight in our country. Is there any harm in this? Can we call the police? The domestic police can't handle this matter, Feng Ling said simply and raised her eyes to look at the man driving in front. Nan Heng's driving skills were not inferior to Emo Jingxin's. It was clear that he was used to driving this type of jeep. Under his control, the large body of the jeep drove out of the area at a fast speed and successfully took the two of them away before the police arrived. Nan Heng really did have a place to stay in T-City. It was a room on the top floor of a hotel that he had reserved for himself. No one was allowed to enter the entire floor. After entering the room, Jin Wan helped Feng Ling to sit on the sofa and urged Nan Heng to get the first aid kit. She then pressed Feng Ling's shoulder, saying, Feng Ling, I'll help you take off your clothes. Otherwise, when the blood coagulates, it will be very painful to take them off. Seeing that Jin Wan seemed to be really worried about her, Feng Ling's originally calm and flat expression wavered slightly. Since she was a child, Feng Ling had never experienced pure friendship with someone of the same gender. In the past, she had always lived like a man in the base. No matter what kind of injuries she suffered, she would hide in a place where no one could see and bandage her own wounds. You can't lift your hand now, can you? I'll help you take it off. Don't move. Jin Wan spoke and went to help her take off her clothes. Feng Ling did not refuse. When her top was taken off, thankfully, there was still a conservative black sportswear underneath. Jin Wan's attention was completely attracted by the knife wounds on Feng Ling's shoulder and arm. With a pained expression, she turned to the bathroom to wash a towel and help her wipe the blood around the wounds. Nan Heng came out with the first aid kit and saw such a scene. His gaze paused on Feng Ling, who was only wearing sports underwear. Before he could speak, Jin Wan had already rushed over and snatched the first aid kit from his hand. She then turned back to disinfect and stopped the bleeding for Feng Ling. The room was very quiet. With Jin Wan bandaging Feng Ling's wounds, it was not convenient for Nan Heng to stand by the side and watch. He coughed and went out. Half an hour later, the wounds on Feng Ling's body were almost all treated. Jin Wan had just picked up the gauze to bandage her wounds. She then went into the room, opened the cabinet, and took out a loose black t-shirt that should have been worn by Nan Heng. She helped Feng Ling put it on. Not long after, Nan Heng entered the room. Seeing that Jin Wan had already crouched down to treat the wounds on Feng Ling's legs, he raised his brows and chuckled softly. You're quite thoughtful in treating the wounds. As expected, Miss Ji is much more useful than before. Jin Wan silently rolled her eyes at the disinfectant in her hand. She thought that Nan Heng was resentful towards her because he wanted to personally bandage Feng Ling's wounds but was unable to do so. She could not be bothered with him. At this moment, the doorbell suddenly rang. Jin Wan was startled and immediately raised her head to look in the direction of the door. She asked in surprise, "Who is it? Is there anyone else here who knows? Could it be those people who chased after Feng Ling earlier?" Nan Heng glanced at her. "Don't think too much. I just went out to talk to Emo Jingxin on the phone. He happens to be nearby. Who do you think will come now?" Hearing this, Jin Wan abruptly turned to stare at the door behind Nan Heng. Chapter 232. Since Mo Jingshan was outside, wasn't it the same no matter who opened the door? It was impossible to shut him out. The doorbell rang again. It was a pleasant chime, not very loud, not harsh. But in Jin Wan's ears, this voice was like a tsunami suddenly sweeping across a calm sea, making it impossible for her to ignore it. Nan Heng was clearly teasing her. He did not open the door but stood there, looking at Jin Wan with a faint smile. Jin Wan's hand was still holding onto the bottle of medicine. She placed it on the wound on Feng Ling's calf and did not immediately get up. Feng Ling glanced at them and suddenly put down her legs. She said, "Why don't I drive it?" Nan Heng immediately glanced at Feng Ling coldly. "Don't be nosy." Feng Ling's expression faltered. It had been a long time since she heard Nan Heng speak in such a cold and stern tone. She paused and chose to sit on the sofa without moving. At the same time, she turned to look at Jin Wan. "Mr. Mo must have come to see you. Go open the door. My leg injury is not serious. I can do it myself." The doorbell did not ring again, but she felt that Mo Jingshan would not leave so soon. She put down the disinfectant in her hand, wiped her hands, and got up to go to the door. The moment she opened the door, Jin Wan's hand gripped the doorknob tightly. The man standing outside the door was tall and slender. He was still wearing that low-key, clean white shirt, which made his originally calm and reserved temperament appear even gentler and more meaningful. Jin Wan raised her eyes and looked at the man outside the door. Mo Jingshan's eyes fell on her face the moment the door opened. They hadn't seen each other for a whole month, and she hadn't been very clear-headed before. This could be considered a true reunion. After opening the door, Jin Wan only met his gaze. Before she could see the emotions in the man's eyes, she let go of the door handle, turned to walk in, and said, "I'll deal with the wound on Feng Ling's leg first." She didn't know if these words were meant for Mo Jingshan, Nan Heng, or Feng Ling. In any case, Jin Wan didn't look at the man outside the door and went to Feng Ling's side. Feng Ling, who had suddenly become Jin Wan's biggest excuse, was thinking. Indeed, she was like a little woman who had just learned how to fall in love. Thinking of Jin Wan's usual calm and composed demeanor, and comparing it with her current state, he somehow found it a little cute. Nan Heng immediately smiled at Mo Jingshan, who had been thrown out the door, with a sympathetic gaze. Mo Jingshan, on the other hand, calmly entered, ignoring Nan Heng's mocking expression. Seeing the blood-stained towel by the sofa and the wound on Feng Ling's leg, he could guess what kind of danger they had just experienced. "What's going on? You were intercepted so quickly?" Mo Jingshan looked at Feng Ling. "Why is Jin Wan with you? Why would Jin Wan be with her?" Of course, he was only referring to today. Feng Ling didn't have time to ask why Jin Wan had gone there. She lowered her eyes to look at Jin Wan, who was squatting by the sofa to disinfect her wound. "I haven't heard from you since yesterday. This has never happened before, so I suspected that something might have happened to you. I planned to go to the neighborhood you lived in for 2 days to take a look, but I ran into this scene." Jin Wan treated the wound on her leg seriously and did not raise her head as she spoke. She didn't expect that Jin Wan would actually worry about her. Clearly, she was Jin Wan's bodyguard. Feng Ling felt slightly ashamed. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Mo. I'll try to avoid this kind of thing in the future. If I accidentally hurt you, it would be my negligence. Today's matter, I'm really, being followed and surrounded by enemies isn't something you can control. Why are you apologizing to me?" Jin Wan still lowered her head, as though using this opportunity to talk to Feng Ling, she could successfully ignore the gaze of the man who was watching her from behind. Feng Ling suddenly raised her head. "Speaking of which, if Mrs. Mo hadn't helped me today, I wouldn't have been able to escape so smoothly." Nan Heng raised his brows and glanced at them. "Is that so? Then as a bodyguard, aren't you going to lose your job soon? Do you want to return to America with me, to the base?" Feng Ling, "No." Nan Heng. Jin Wan raised her eyes to look at Feng Ling. Seeing that she rejected her so straightforwardly, she immediately smiled. "That's right, I'm not going back. Feng Ling is fine by my side. Why would I return to the base in America? What's so good about being with a bunch of men and suffering? Besides, even if I don't completely need a bodyguard by my side, I still need a good sister. Don't you think so?" Feng Ling? These few days, Feng Ling had been touched by Jin Wan's words time and time again. She looked at Jin Wan and slightly raised the corners of her lips. Nan Heng suddenly narrowed his eyes. He felt that after spending so much time with Jin Wan, Feng Ling had actually gained a hint of femininity and gentleness that he had never seen before. Does it hurt? Jin Wan saw that there was a red and swollen area around Feng Ling's ankle. She wasn't sure if she had bumped into it somewhere, so she used her hand to touch it. No, Feng Ling answered with a smile. Seeing the two of them acting out their deep sisterly affection, the two men who were completely ignored exchanged a silent glance. After helping Feng Ling with her wounds, Jin Wan stood up. She tidied up the medicine box and asked, Nan Heng, do you have water here? Earlier, when she pulled Feng Ling along to run, Jin Wan didn't know if it was because of her heart or because she was really thirsty. Either way, her mouth was dry. Drinkable water? In the fridge, there's mineral water prepared by the hotel every day. Go look for it yourself. Although this was a hotel room, it was a family-style suite. There was a kitchen, a study, and a kitchen. The fridge would also have drinks delivered by the staff on time. Jin Wan put down the things in her hands and turned to enter the kitchen. She opened the fridge door and took out a bottle of water. She was about to twist it open when she realized that the cap was too tight. This was a bottle of mineral water that had not been opened. It was likely that the cap was not handled well when it left the factory. It was much tighter than other mineral water. She used a bit of force but was still unable to twist it open. She was about to place this bottle back into the fridge and change to another one. She had just opened the fridge door when the bottle in her hand was suddenly taken away. She only saw an arm reach out from behind her, and the water was already in that person's hand. Without needing to turn back, she only needed to see the arm in the white shirt to know that the man standing behind her was Mo Jingshan. Jin Wan was silent for a moment in front of the fridge door. She turned to look at the man who had easily opened the bottle cap for her. The already opened bottle of mineral water was handed to her. Mo Jingshan's voice was the same as always. Drink it. Jin Wan's hand paused for a moment before she raised it. When she received the water, her mind was still in a daze. For some reason, she said, "Thank you." Chapter 233. Thank you. Mo Jingshan's voice was low and indifferent. He glanced at her. Who are you talking to? To you, of course. Jin Wan held the water bottle without speaking. She then took a sip and calmly answered honestly. He did not speak further. Just as Jin Wan was about to walk past him to leave the kitchen with the bottle, he abruptly held her in his arms. He pushed the woman who was holding the bottle carefully forward, forcing her against the wall opposite the refrigerator. Seeing that the man was angered by her words, Jin Wan finally believed that he was not as indifferent as he appeared. He could control her emotions and her emotions. It turned out that this man was not always so calm. It turned out that he was also a mortal. He also had his emotions. She raised her eyes to look at him. What are you doing? Nan Heng and Feng Ling are both outside. Even if you gave them 100 guts, they wouldn't dare to come in. Mo Jingshan's voice was as low and cold as ever. Repeat what you just said. Who are you saying thank you to? Jin Wan, who am I to you? Jin Wan's expression remained the same. Her voice was also calm. You used to be my husband. Then, we suddenly didn't contact each other for an entire month. Who would know who you are to me? Mo Jingshan raised his brows. Aside from throwing a tantrum, your attitude before and after drinking is basically the same. So, you don't intend to give any explanation for drinking behind my back? Why should I explain? Jin Wan calmly looked at him. What I should guard against is not the problem of whether I drink or not, but my heart, right? She could not recall all the words she said that night after getting drunk, but she still had some impression of them. Even though she knew that it was not easy for him to appear, even though she knew how difficult this month had been, she still could not put down her pride. Even though some of the mistakes had come from her. But right now, she could not bring herself to smile. After being treated coldly for a month, it was as though she was placed in an ice house. Mo Jingshan's eyes gradually revealed a faint smile. He watched as her stiffened expression was like a disobedient kitten. She was clearly soft and waiting for his touch, yet she insisted on acting stiff and forbidding. He lowered his head and moved closer to her lips. "What? You're still so unreasonable now that you're awake?" Jin-won rushed to move back, but the man had already kissed her. However, he only kissed her once on the lips before moving away. As she glared at him, he moved his hands away from her shoulders and placed them against the wall behind her. He lowered his eyes to stare at her. "Why are you still angry? It's been a month, and you still haven't figured it out?" The man stood under the kitchen light, his long shadow looming in front of her, blocking out most of the light. "How would I dare to be angry? Just because you threw a tantrum, you were given the cold shoulder for a month. If I were angry because you didn't answer my call, I'm afraid you would directly draw a line with me, wouldn't you?" Jin-won coldly glanced at him. "Don't stand here and block me. Let me out." With that, she tried to push him away. In the end, her strength was always futile against this man. She pushed him a few times, but he didn't move an inch. Instead, the way he looked at her became deeper and deeper. She turned her eyes away, refusing to look at him. She frowned and said, "Feng Ling is still injured. I don't want to talk to you about not answering my call. Compared to you stubbornly wanting to save face and purposely hanging up after one ring, which one is worse?" Mo Jingshan stared at her face, speaking softly. "That day, when I arrived in High City, I contacted the subsidiary company in advance. There was an emergency meeting, and after I left T University, the company's car came to pick me up. I put my phone on silent mode and placed it by the side. When I looked through the company's documents and picked up my phone, I saw that you had 2 missed calls." Jin-won did not speak, but her gaze remained unkind. "Speaking of which, it's interesting." The man placed his hand against her neck. "In this entire month, the first time you called, you hung up after 1 ring. The second time you called, it was already a month later. I didn't pick up, and you went to drink to drown your sorrows. Thinking about it, you're indeed living a carefree life. You can be so unrestrained when you're happy or unhappy. Even the reason you went to drink is so perfect." It was clear that these words were purposely mocking. Although the meaning behind it was not deep, it was an ironic mockery. Yet it was aimed at her vitals. For a moment, Jin-won was speechless. Nan Heng and Feng Ling were still outside. She really did not wish to cause any trouble here. Furthermore, the 2 of them had already stayed in the kitchen for long enough. It was necessary for them to leave. She was about to raise her hand to push him away again, but the man did not let go. "If you still have any grievances, just say it. Don't keep it in your heart. Just say it." His gaze was too deep and too intense, binding her tightly against the wall. She couldn't escape, nor could she avoid it. Jin-won looked at Mo Jingshan, who was so close to her, and absent-mindedly recalled the feeling of not being able to touch him for a month. She gritted her teeth and said, "Didn't I already say earlier? How would I dare to have any grievances? In terms of temper, my temper isn't as big as yours. In terms of ruthlessness, I'm also not as ruthless as you." As she spoke, she leaned against the wall even more. Even though the distance between them was only a few hundredths of a millimeter, she still had to move further away. However, she was still in his arms. Mo Jingshan looked at her and then at her, subconsciously resisting his intimacy. His gaze was indifferent, and he did not give her a chance to move further away. He directly leaned down, using an absolutely oppressive posture to deprive her of her freedom. He leaned closer to her lips and said in a low voice, "If you want to calm down, I'll let you calm down. Is a month a long time? Previously, didn't you say that you wanted to live apart from me for 3 months and have a so-called long-distance relationship?" Jin-won, a month was not a long time. But a month without seeing or receiving any news from him was really a very, very long time. It was so long that she began to doubt her life. Jin-won could not hold it in any longer. Since she had already said it to this point, there was no need to suppress it anymore. She abruptly said, "Even if what I said that day may have touched your bottom line, and you're unhappy that I don't trust you, you just left like this for a month. During this month, you just left me hanging. Do you feel at ease?" "I didn't leave you hanging." Then why didn't you send any news for a month? I took the time to resolve a past that shouldn't have existed. Resolve? Past? Although he didn't say it directly, Jin-won understood him. A month ago, when she questioned him about that so-called fiancé, he said that he would deal with it. So, it turned out that he went to Chapter 234. So, it turned out that in the past month, he had gone to solve those things? How did he solve them? This man always did everything without batting an eyelid. Jin-won had thought that he was simply angry with her and gave her the cold shoulder for a month. It turned out that he was actually so decisive. She suddenly lowered her eyes. For a moment, she didn't even know what she was angry about. In the past month, had she calmed down? She had indeed calmed down, and she was way too calm. She glanced at Mo Jingshin again. On my birthday, you were the one who made the cake. Why didn't you tell me? As she spoke, she puffed up her cheeks unhappily, but this unhappiness didn't come from anger. Instead, she was annoyed that because of what happened in her previous life, she was too subjective and defensive when looking at certain things. Instead, she neglected too much warmth and detail. Perhaps she was only annoyed. You still know that I made those cakes? When I cut them one by one, I didn't see your heart ache, the man said half-jokingly, stroking her hand. You're not angry anymore, and? What was there to be angry about? Jin-won wasn't that unreasonable. She wouldn't give up a good man. Was she really going to give up this piece of meat to someone else? She wasn't a masochist. Jin-won suddenly pulled down one of his hands that was leaning against the wall behind her. She held his palm that was much larger than her own. It was hard to imagine how he had the energy to make so many cakes for her that day. Whether it was the cream or the base cake, the taste was especially sweet and soft. This man could do everything so well. He was really impeccable. She held his hand in her palm and then held his slender fingers, whispering, "Then what do you want as compensation?" Mo Jingshin looked at her, and his eyes were full of smiles. He held her hand, lowered his head to kiss it, and then leaned over to kiss her lips. He pressed his lips against hers and said hoarsely in a low voice, "What do you think I need as compensation?" Jin-won's body immediately softened from his kiss. She pursed her lips and said, "How about I make 21 dishes for you tonight? After you're done, you're going to throw them away right in front of me? Am I that childish?" You mean I'm childish? It had been a long time since Jin-won cooked, especially after she came to Tea City. Right now, she was trying to think of ways to make up for her mistake by giving him a chance to take revenge and make him feel good. However, since he didn't appreciate her kindness, she couldn't be blamed. Suddenly, a few dong-dong sounds came from the wall outside the kitchen. Nanheng knocked on the wall a few times. "You two don't go too far. You've been in there for so long. Do you need me to take Feng Ling away and leave this room to you?" Jin-won subconsciously tugged on Mo Jingshin's hand, rushing to leave. However, Mo Jingshin did not move. He pulled her back and took the opportunity to hold the little woman who was leaning against the wall to maintain a distance from him. He whispered by her ear, "Giving up the room to us is not a bad choice." Jin-won, she pressed her hand against his chest. Feng Ling was just injured, and it's clear that she's being chased by some unknown force. After all, she's someone you hired. You have to be concerned about her safety. How can there be such a cold-blooded boss like you? With Nanheng around, she doesn't need my concern. His words were simple and straightforward. Then he warned and commanded, "In the future, if there's any activity from unknown pursuers or foreigners, you're not allowed to get close." Although Feng Ling's skills aren't bad, her background isn't simple. When the situation is tense, what you need to do is to take care of yourself, understand? Today, when Jin-won rushed into the alley with a baseball bat, it was probably because Feng Ling was there. She believed that Feng Ling would be able to handle it, so she had the confidence to rush in to help. Of course, she had the awareness to protect herself, but she wasn't too weak. Hiding whenever something happened wasn't her style. Of course, she wouldn't let others worry about her. "I know. When it's cold, you don't show up. When it's good, you're like a housekeeper, managing me," Jin-won muttered. Mo Jingshin, When Jinwan walked out of the kitchen, she saw that Feng Ling had put on her black sports coat. If it weren't for the fact that she was only wearing underwear inside and couldn't take it off, she would have taken off Nan Heng's black t-shirt as well. She saw Feng Ling sitting on the sofa with the coat on, as though the person who was injured earlier was not her. Aside from the fact that her complexion was paler than usual, there was no difference. Was this the reason she had received training? She couldn't even cry out in pain and had to endure all kinds of feelings as though they had never happened? You're finally willing to come out. I thought the two of you would stay in my kitchen until the end of time. Nan Heng leaned against the wall outside the kitchen door with a cold smile. His eyes glanced at Jinwan's expression, which had softened a lot. Without guessing, he knew that this little woman had probably been coaxed. Mo Jingshan placed his hand on Jinwan's waist, encircling the little woman who was about to head to the sofa in his arms to prevent her from running away. He glanced at Feng Ling and the medicine box by her feet before shifting his gaze to Nan Heng's side. They went in such a big circle. Was their target her or you? Nan Heng's face was indifferent and he smiled lazily. We're all working together in 11 base. Their biggest target is either me or her. What's the difference? Mo Jingshan looked at him and said indifferently, your woman has been injured to this extent. You clearly want to personally uproot the nest of those trash, but now you can lean against here and smile as though nothing has happened. Even Jinwan isn't as big-hearted as you. Nan Heng, Jinwan? What did it have to do with her? Mr. Mo, I'm not his woman. Although you're my current boss, please don't put labels on me. Feng Ling spoke up, protesting unhappily. However, Mo Jingshan seemed not to hear her words and only glanced coldly at Nan Heng. Nan Heng was silent for a few seconds and temporarily put away his lazy attitude. These days, women are not easy to raise. Whether they're light or heavy, it's wrong to keep them by your side. It's wrong to let them go. Jinwan didn't understand his words. Sitting on the sofa, Feng Ling's expression turned cold. Chapter 235. Although Jinwan was held in Mo Jingshan's arms, she still silently shifted closer to him. Although she could not accurately capture the meaning of their conversation, she could still smell the faint smell of gunpowder. She had long known that Nan Heng's background was not simple, and that the people involved in the arms business could not be simple either. However, she did not expect the severity of the situation to be deeper than she had imagined. In this aspect, it did not only involve the arms business, the country, and the underworld. There were many other problems that Jinwan had not come into contact with. At this moment, she was only thinking about how Nan Heng was so complicated. What exactly was his relationship with Mo Jingshan and Qin Sighting? She vaguely remembered that Qin Sighting had mentioned that he had saved Feng Ling's life in America. What about Mo Jingshan? What kind of role did he play between them? Compared to the coldness in Nan Heng's eyes and Jinwan's silent confusion, Mo Jingshan appeared especially unperturbed. The road to death is their own choice. It's not a big price to drag you down with them before they die. It was clear that Mo Jingshan was reminding them. Nan Heng had naturally understood this long ago. Nan Heng curved his thin lips coldly. I didn't bring Feng Ling back to the country purely to be your woman's bodyguard. Since I left her in the country, I've naturally hidden an ambush. If they want to come, they can come. I guarantee that if they come, they will die. Mo Jingshan patted Jinwan's waist from time to time, his expression mild. Using your own woman as bait, only you, Nan Heng, would do such a cold-blooded and heartless thing. Nan Heng, Mr. Mo, I already knew all the missions and procedures at the base. Everything was my own choice, Feng Ling interrupted. This was probably the first time Feng Ling had spoken up for Nan Heng in front of them, but her tone was clearly cold. Letting a woman protect you, is this something a man should do? Mo Jingshan ignored her, as though he was purposely provoking Nan Heng, throwing a ruthless knife at him. Nan Heng. The way you two are echoing each other, I almost suspect that Feng Ling has been brainwashed by your woman. When did she learn to cooperate with you? Jinwan suddenly spoke up softly. Nan Heng, Feng Ling was clearly speaking up for you earlier. Doesn't your conscience hurt when you said that? Although she did not understand the situation well, seeing Mo Jingshan, who understood the situation, criticize Nan Heng in such a manner and seemed to be enjoying it, Jinwan could not help but join in. Nan Heng did not speak again. He suddenly narrowed his eyes coldly and looked meaningfully at Feng Ling. Feng Ling did not continue to say anything. She stood there in the sportswear stained with blood. By the time she left Nan Heng's hotel, it was already very late. Even if T University didn't have a curfew, Jinwan knew that she wouldn't be able to return to the dorm tonight. Mo Jingshan brought her back to T University's condominium. In the car, she asked, "The solution you mentioned earlier, did you return to America last month? I have to do what I promised you. If I don't go there myself, how can I give you a perfect explanation?" The man's voice was calm and low. It was one thing to guess it, but it was another to hear it from his own mouth. Jinwan's heart immediately beat wildly from the heat. "I'm not too calculative. It's just that what happened that time was too much of a shock to me. In that kind of situation, if I could still maintain my rationality and not question or vent at all, I'm afraid I wouldn't be a normal person. Or perhaps I don't care at all. However, I have no intention of forcing you to do anything, nor do I want to make things difficult for you. It's not difficult. You don't have to worry about this matter. I said I'll handle it, so I'll handle it. I definitely won't leave behind any future troubles." Jinwan glanced at him. Did he mean that the person who wanted to snatch this piece of meat from her mouth was no longer the biggest problem? Although Mo Jingshan might be able to resolve the Gordian knot if he personally took action. But for her, wouldn't it be too unchallenging to be killed before she even saw the enemy? They alighted from the car and returned to the condominium. Mo Jingshan immediately held her hand after alighting. The man's palm coincidentally held onto her hand. She turned to assess him and found that Mo Jingshan seemed to be maintaining his original state at all times. There was never any sudden changes. Regardless of whether it was his personality or his appearance, he was very stable. That night, the reason why I was able to relax enough to drink was because I knew Feng Ling was by my side. That's why I was so at ease. Jinwan glanced at him again. "That day, you didn't really bring me away from the place where I was drinking, did you? Did you not want me to see your drunken appearance when Feng Ling helped you out? Or did you not want me to know that you were so drunk that you couldn't even recognize my face?" When Mo Jingshan heard her mention the matter of drinking, he initially ignored her. Only when he pulled her into the elevator did he cast her an indifferent glance. Jinwan, there was no need to ask. It was clear that he had indeed found her in that bar. So at that time, she couldn't even recognize his face? No, that's not right. At that time, she only thought that she had seen wrongly and thought that it was an illusion. How could she not recognize Mo Jingshan's face? After entering the elevator, Mo Jingshan swiped the elevator card and did not look at her again. Jinwan knew that she had promised him that she would not drink anymore. In the end, she still purposely used alcohol to drown her sorrows. Mo Jingshan did not want to bicker with her over such things when he had just coaxed her. However, it was clear that he was still unhappy with her drinking. Jinwan stood by his side and watched their figures through the elevator door mirror. When their gazes met, she directly leaned against his arm. "In the future, even if I drink, I'll only drink happy alcohol and celebratory alcohol. I won't use alcohol to drown my sorrows or sulk with you anymore." The man finally raised his eyes and glanced at her through the mirror. "You didn't even plan on not touching a single drop of alcohol. Happy alcohol? You sure know how many lines you'll cut off when you drink." Jinwan pursed her lips. The elevator stopped at the apartment floor and she followed him out of the elevator. Before returning, they sat down at Nan Heng's place and had some food with everyone. Jinwan was not hungry now. After entering the door, she turned on the light and had just changed her shoes when she saw Mo Jingshan put on the gray indoor slippers. The man who had disappeared for a whole month had returned just like that. The emptiness in her heart was instantly filled. For a moment, she couldn't tell what kind of feeling she was feeling, but inexplicably, she was relieved. Recently, Jinwan's schedule was too unhealthy and she was used to being sleepy. After all, it was almost 11 o'clock. She took off her coat and went straight into the bathroom, planning to take a shower and go to bed. Because she was too sleepy, she didn't even soak in the bathtub but directly took a shower under the shower head. However, the bathroom door suddenly opened. She raised her sleepy face and didn't react for a moment. She only saw the man in a shirt and trousers step on the water stains on the ground and come over in the white mist. The man's arm circled her waist, and with the other hand he turned off the bathtub and immediately picked her up by the waist. Jinwan was a little sleepy. "I haven't finished my shower yet. What are you doing? Let's shower together later." Chapter 236. Jinwan was carried out of the bathroom by him. She didn't even have a towel, let alone clothes. Naked, she was directly brought out of the bathroom by the man. "What time is it now?" Although Jinwan was sleepy, every time he touched her body, her whole body was extremely sensitive. In addition, she wasn't wearing any clothes, and the slightly cold indoor air touched her skin, making her particularly sensitive. He was going to carry her back to the bedroom, but because she was naked, Jinwan squirmed uncomfortably in his arms. He finally couldn't restrain himself. Although he hadn't touched her for more than a month and wouldn't do anything to his lower body every day, the moment this woman pressed against his arms, the self-control Jinxian was most proud of instantly disappeared. The man's sudden kiss was slightly more urgent than Jinwan had expected. Before they reached the bedroom, he pressed her down on the long table behind the sofa with several books. Although this seemingly gentleman style in bed was never as gentle as his appearance, Jinwan still couldn't resist him. "Be gentle." He lowered his head to kiss her. He made a vague sound and didn't show any signs of slowing down. She protested softly, "Let's go back to the bedroom." He kissed her lips and chuckled hoarsely. "No, I can't wait." "Jinwan, it's only a few steps from the bedroom. Do you think it's necessary? Including the half a month before your birthday, I've been a vegetarian for almost a month and a half. Do you think it's necessary?" The man's hot and husky breath pressed against her ear. He kissed and bit her earlobe, burning the sensitive spot on her ear. "Do you think your husband is a saint? Do you think he can watch you close the door and sleep after taking a shower? But it's cold and hard here." Being stared at by the man's ink-like eyes, Jinwan suddenly felt that she was about to burn. She forced herself to appear calm and composed, but in fact, a small flame had already leaped up in her heart, burning brighter and brighter. Just as she finished speaking, the man who had been pressing her against the table easily exerted a little force. Her entire body was suddenly turned around, and in an instant, she was leaning against the edge of the table and holding her in his arms. The man pinched her chin and kissed her again. He pried open her teeth and attacked her. He swept across her teeth even more fiercely and domineeringly than usual, bringing her into his mouth and kissing her inch by inch, not letting go of any part of her. It had indeed been a while since they were intimate. Jinwan thought she was very calm in this regard. Although Jinxian teased her until she couldn't control herself, at least the two of them had gone through the stage of inseparable entanglement. These few months of separation shouldn't be a big deal, but this sudden and different kind of stimulation, in this kind of place, in this kind of position, Jinxian clearly took into consideration that it had been a while since she last did it and that it would be difficult for her to adapt. Although he was already like an arrow on the bowstring, he still patiently released her. Soft and dense kisses landed on her neck and ears. He sucked on her earlobe, bit on her collarbone, and moved downwards. Jinwan was stimulated to the point that the corners of her eyes turned red. She bit down and was forced to shrink back. The living room light landed on her fair, delicate, and beautiful skin. She softly and hoarsely said, "Don't." The man ignored her. His hand slid down the white skin of her thigh. Jinwan moaned softly and sobbed. "Jinxian, what did you call me?" Jinxian's hand paused. He darkly glanced at her. Jinwan, hubby, it had been a while since she called him this. She couldn't react in time. In the end, her soft and delicate voice caused the man's gaze to darken. Jinwan saw his extremely dark and thick gaze. When he looked at her, it was clear that he would not give her any leeway or chance to retreat. Tonight, he would definitely not let her off so easily. Jinxian lowered his eyes, watching the woman he had been holding in his arms the entire time. Because of his teasing, she was sitting weakly on his lap. Her exquisite, fair body was exposed under the light. The veins on his forehead were about to pop. "Do you really like to call me by my full name?" His voice was terrifyingly hoarse. His head moved closer to her ear, softly and unhurriedly saying, "In a while, I'll let you shout to your heart's content. Remember not to cry." The man's brazen threat caused Jinwan to involuntarily shrink into his embrace. She felt that there was really no way for her to sleep tonight. Without waiting for her to speak, his still mischievous fingers directly invaded her. "Even if you cry, I won't let you off." Jinwan whimpered, unconsciously shrinking her body. Her entire body was dyed with a faint rose color. Her hands trembled as she grabbed his arm, using an undetectable amount of strength to push him away. "Wait a minute, should we first decide on a time to end? If I don't sleep for an entire night, I really won't be able to take it." "I can't wait." Mo Jingshan did not give her any chance to speak. The movement of his fingers had already brought out all of her senses, which she could no longer control. Jinwan buried her head into his neck, her nails digging into his back. Her lower lip was bitten until there was a white mark. Her entire body was stimulated to the point that her eyes were covered with a layer of mist. A drop of water flowed out from the corner of her eyes. "I still have classes tomorrow. You're suspended from classes tomorrow." The man bit down on her neck, his voice extremely hoarse. "Suspended? What's suspended? How did you know? I didn't even hear about it. As an investor of T University's library, I've directly given you the title of an honorary principal. If I say that classes will be suspended tomorrow, who dares to not do so?" Jinwan, tomorrow was the weekend, and it was true that there were only a few classes and Professor Lin's class that would occasionally have supplementary classes. Even if classes were suspended for a day, it would not have much of an impact. However, she never expected that the man who had always been so calm in the company would actually have such a domineering side for the sake of his own selfishness. If she did not feed him tonight, it was possible that T University would have to suspend classes for an entire week starting tomorrow. Jinwan was slightly distracted. Mo Jingshan suddenly placed his hand on the back of her head, placing a gentle and light kiss on her forehead. He kissed her hair while his other fingers slowly inched inwards inch by inch, causing Jinwan's trembling whimper. Jinwan's suppressed voice was as soft as a kitten's. Each sound crashed into his eardrums, grinding against the restraints he had forced out in order to allow her to adapt as quickly as possible. Chapter 237. The light in the living room became ambiguous. Jinwan could barely hold it in. He looked at her, his low chuckle causing her ears to turn red. He pressed against her waist, pressing against her slightly. Even through her clothes, she could feel the heat. She shrank back from the pressure. Afraid that she would fall, she held onto his shoulder, pressing against him even more. Mo Jingshan seemed to be able to completely control her nerves. Jinwan's waist softened. She wanted to close her legs but could only whimper against his neck because of this position. It was as though she was instinctively yearning for more, but also as though she was faintly resisting this surging tide of passion. Seeing her like this, Mo Jingshan could no longer hold it in and was about to press her back onto the table. He was just about to move when a voice abruptly rang by his ear. Jinwan's phone rang. She immediately struggled. Phone. Mo Jingshan furrowed his brows. "Ignore it." As he spoke, his fingertips pressed deeper. Jinwan bit down on her voice and pushed his hand away. "It's getting late. It's either because there's something urgent in the studio in High City or because there might be something at school. If Professor Lin has something important to inform me, it won't be good if I miss it." Mo Jingshan glanced at her. It was clear that he did not intend to let her go. However, Jinwan immediately tensed up in his arms. If he did not let her answer the phone now, his temper that had just calmed down would most likely surge again. He finally released some of his strength. Jinwan wanted to get up from his body, but her legs were too weak to move. She looked awkwardly at the phone on the sofa. "Go and get it for me." Sitting on him, she ordered him around, taking advantage of the fact that she had been seduced by him. Mo Jingshan did not say anything more. He held her waist with one hand and brought her up, while the other went to the sofa to pick up the phone. Jinwan's whole body was still soft. She lay on him until the man sat on the sofa with her in his arms. She leaned over and was about to hide, but he didn't let go at all. As he handed the phone to her, he still let her sit on his lap and signaled her to take it with his eyes. Jinwan was helpless. Without looking at the caller ID, she put the phone to her ear. The little woman in his arms had just been stimulated, and her eyes were watery. Her lips had also been kissed until they were dark red, and her chest was faintly discernible. Her long, undried hair was tangled around her body like seaweed. What a vixen! Mo Jingshan's Adam's apple bobbed. He decided to close his eyes and place his hand on his brow. He leaned against the sofa and patiently waited for her to finish her call. His lower body was tightly pressed against hers, and the hardness that could not be ignored was pressed against her through the fabric. Jinwan did not dare to move. Ling Feifei's questioning voice abruptly came through the phone. Jinwan, why didn't you and Feng Ling return to the dormitory today? Although Jinwan and Ling Feifei did not have a good relationship, she never had to explain her whereabouts to anyone. For Ling Feifei to suddenly call to question her in the middle of the night, Jinwan instinctively felt that it was strange. I'm outside, what's wrong? Is something the matter? Jinwan patiently asked. It's nothing much. It's just that a diamond watch I bought before coming to T-City has disappeared. A few days ago, it was still in the dormitory. Yesterday, it suddenly disappeared. I originally wanted to ask if you guys saw it, but in the past 2 days, you and Feng Ling coincidentally didn't come back to stay. I can't help but be suspicious. So, when are you guys coming back? Ling Feifei's tone was unkind. Jinwan was extremely annoyed with people like Ling Feifei. There was not a single day where she could rest. How could there be so many problems? What diamond watch? She had never even seen one before. Could it be that she had been unhappy for a while and was thinking of ways to frame someone and create more trouble? She was quiet for a moment before coldly saying, Do I look like I'd be interested in a diamond watch that's worth at most 100,000, or would Feng Ling be interested in something that's embedded with diamonds? Wouldn't you call the police if you lost something? Calling me, are you hoping to find it in my cabinet or bag? Don't you think your motive is too deliberate? The person on the other side of the phone seemed to choke from her precise words. After several seconds of silence, she abruptly reprimanded, In any case, there are only these few people in the dormitory. Usually, no one comes in. So what if you can afford to buy a gown that's worth $1 million? What if that's all your savings? I've seen people who borrow money to act cool, let alone someone like you. Who knows if you're using all your money to act cool? My watch is lost, but where are you and Feng Ling right now? Even if I want to call the police, I have to call you suspects back. Otherwise, if you guys escape, where am I going to find you? Crazy. It's none of your business when I go back, but you have to remember that both my and Feng Ling's cabinets have a separate password lock, and the number of times it can be opened is limited. When the password lock is opened, the connected phone software will also record it. Once my and Feng Ling's cabinets have been opened in the past few days and what was put in them, the police may find out. Are you sure you want to play such childish tricks? The person on the other side of the phone fell silent. Just as Jinwan was about to hang up, he angrily hung up first. Why were there always people in this world who liked to find trouble? Did their brains grow under their feet, or did they think they were too scheming and could easily be pinched like a bun? However, Jinwan was not in the mood to consider whether he was stupid or not. She threw her phone back on the sofa and put her hands on the man's chest. Her legs were still a little weak. She was about to jump out of his arms when she had just calmed down, but the man abruptly pressed her back down. What call did you pick up? Mo Jingshan clearly saw the impatience and disgust in Jinwan's eyes. It was rare to see her show such obvious dislike toward someone. A lunatic in the dormitory. I don't know if she has persecutory delusions or likes to mindlessly make her presence known. Ignore her. I can't be bothered to mention such a person. Jin Wan had just answered when she felt the man's body pressing closer and closer. Jin Wan's emotions and feelings that had slightly moved away were instantly pulled back by his action. She watched as he held her waist with one hand and unbuttoned his clothes with the other. The buttons of his shirt were unbuttoned by him single-handedly. This visual effect was truly indescribably seductive. Especially the man's gaze, which was very deep and dark. "Are you really not going to return to the bedroom?" Earlier, he clearly waited for her to answer the phone. Chapter 238. I'll go back in a bit. The man had yet to finish speaking when Jin Wan's leg was abruptly held by him. Her vision suddenly spun as she was pressed against the sofa by the man. She raised her eyes to meet the man's dark and deep eyes. In an instant she actually began to stutter. "You, control yourself." However, before she could finish her words, the man had already grabbed her ankle, which was forced up by this position, and abruptly pounced on her. He held her chin and kissed her face. Jin Wan's hair was messy, and her face was flushed. She was so charming that it was indescribable. Soft moans escaped from her mouth. It was as though she was enjoying it, but at the same time, it was as though she was being tortured. She subconsciously clenched the sofa beneath her. The man bent down to kiss her sweaty face. His voice was tight and hoarse as he pressed against her soft lips, asking vaguely, "Did you miss me?" Right now, Jin Wan could no longer understand what he was referring to. "Are you still going to throw a tantrum with me in the future?" "How can I guarantee that my emotions will always be at the same level? It can't be that I won't even allow you to throw a tantrum. You can throw a tantrum, but you can't throw a tantrum, especially when it's related to misunderstandings. If you can clear it up, then clear it up. You're not allowed to lock yourself in the room again, and you're not allowed to let your imagination run wild." At such a time, the man was shockingly calm. Although his voice was hoarse, he slammed against the sofa even harder, causing Jin Wan's mind to go blank. She was completely unable to hear what he was saying. Mo Jingshan controlled his temper and asked hoarsely again, "Are you still going to lock yourself in the room and not come out?" This time, Jin Wan roughly heard it clearly. She opened her eyes slightly and looked at the man above her. His eyes were like the surging waves of the boundless ocean. They were heavy and focused on her body. Jin Wan looked at his gaze and felt as though she was about to drown. Her heart beat wildly. "And sorry." Jin Wan felt that she really wasn't rational enough at that time. Previously, she was stubborn and wanted to save her face. Right now, even that bit of temper that she shouldn't have was gone. He bent down and pressed his lips against hers. It was a very light, delicate, and gentle kiss. The sensations beneath her grew more intense with each layer, almost drowning her. Jin Wan raised her arms and wrapped them around the man's neck with some difficulty. She pressed her burning face against his chin, her voice tender and soft with hints of naturalness and tenderness. "I love you." Mo Jingshan's movements did not stop. In fact, he became even more ferocious and intense than before. When he heard these two words, he looked at her, and his ink-black gaze deepened. He suddenly kissed her again, stealing away her breath. "Jin Wan." After starving for so long, she knew that she could not help. Jin Wan didn't know which of her words had agitated him, but those two words suddenly spilled out of her mouth based on her feelings. Afterward, she almost forgot what she had said to him, but this night, she was tormented from inside out by this man. In the end, when she was so stimulated that she almost lost her voice from crying, the man abruptly bit her lips, swallowed her hoarse voice, and pressed her firmly into his arms. The next morning, Mo Jingshan's biological clock was earlier and more punctual than Jin Wan's. Although Jin Wan slept soundly in his arms, when the man rose, she still felt something. However, she was too tired to open her eyes. The man who had just gotten up gently lifted the quilt and got up so as not to wake her up. He seemed to have been watching her for a long time. The two of them had been together for a long time. Even if Jin Wan didn't open her eyes, she could feel the man's gaze on her face. He was very focused and did not move away for a long time. Just when she was half asleep and considering whether she should get up directly, the man kissed her on the face and got out of bed. This sense of security allowed Jinwan's tired heart to regain its footing. She hugged the blanket and turned over to continue sleeping. It was already past 8 o'clock when he finished showering, changed his clothes, and went to the kitchen to prepare breakfast for her. When he returned to the bedroom, the woman on the bed had already sat up, but she still had a sleepy expression on her face. Her hair was messy and scattered behind her shoulders, and she was wearing the nightgown he had helped her change into last night after taking a shower. Jinwan really did not have enough sleep. Last night, this man was really too cruel and inhumane. However, right now, she was indeed hungry. She smelled the scent of breakfast, and it was even made by Great Boss Missouri himself. Just the smell alone was enough to entice her to wake up. Mo Jingshan casually buttoned his sleeves, walking toward the bed with his long legs. "You're awake? Get up and wash up. Have breakfast." Jinwan raised her sleepy eyes. "Can I come back to sleep for a while after breakfast?" When she raised her eyes, she saw that the man had already finished washing up. His black shirt was different from the white one from yesterday, but it was still incomparably handsome. His well-dressed appearance made it hard for one to associate him with the energetic and unrestrained beast from last night. He was as clean and handsome as ever, perfect to the point of being impeccable. "Get up and eat first. After eating, walk around the room to digest before sleeping. Otherwise, you'll get indigestion." The man most likely knew how bad he was last night and did not force her to get up. He said in a heavy voice, "The breakfast is still warm. Do you want to wait until it's cold before eating?" Jinwan rushed to remove the blankets. The soreness between her legs was too obvious. She stood up and changed her posture several times before finally finding a more comfortable position to walk out. "Classes are really suspended today?" When she walked to the dining table, she saw the long-awaited Mo Jingshan breakfast. She yawned as she reluctantly went to wash up. She could only eat after washing up. Classes are suspended, so you can continue sleeping at home. There's no need to worry about whether you'll miss Professor Lin's class." The man placed the cutlery on the table. Jinwan stood in the bathroom to brush her teeth. There was clearly a bathroom in the bedroom. Although she had seen this side of Mo Jingshan before, it was truly rare. She really wanted to see it, so she stood there and brushed her teeth while watching the man's back view under the morning sun. After washing up, they sat down to eat. Mo Jingshan understood her appetite very well. He made just enough food for 2 people. However, after eating with him, Jinwan did not move from her seat. She looked at the man who was about to take the dishes to the dishwasher and raised her face to say, "I'm not full yet. I want to eat another bowl of noodles. A small bowl is fine too." Chapter 239. Jinwan was clearly acting coquettishly, even her tone was soft. Mo Jingshan rubbed her head. "Are you sure?" Jinwan nodded. "I'm sure." If Mo Jingshan's memory was correct, the amount of food she ate for breakfast was just right. However, from her expression, it seemed like she was not full yet. "What kind of noodles do you want to eat?" "Anything is fine as long as you cook it." "Are you sure you can still eat?" He did not ask further. "Wait, I'll go cook." Jinwan was really not purposely acting coquettishly. After being tormented by the man for an entire night, it was only right for her to ask for some interest. Furthermore, her appetite had increased significantly recently. Although her weight did not increase and she was still as thin as before, every bowl of Mo Jingshan's breakfast made of love counted. After all, it was something that could only be chanced upon. 3 days later. "Jinwan, it's been several days since you've returned to the dormitory. You mustn't be late for Professor Lin's morning class today. I heard from Professor Lin that the person who invested in T University's library has officially become our school's honorary principal. This morning, there will be a meeting with the school leaders in front of all the teachers and students. The honorary principal should also say a few words. I'm not sure what the situation will be like today, but right now, the students around me are all very excited. You must remember not to be late." Bai Wei kept urging her over the phone. "Jinwan, I understand. I'll be there soon." "Hurry up, You can't be absent today. All right. I'll be there soon. Jin-won hung up the phone while glancing at the so-called T University's newly appointed honorary principal who was resting with his eyes closed in the back of the car. Bai Wei's call was naturally to remind her not to be absent. After all, the MO Corporation's status in the country was not simple. For the business and enterprise management students, to have the opportunity to interact with the rumored CEO MO was indeed a grand event that they could not miss. You'll be going to T University today? She looked at the man and asked with some hesitation. Mo Jingshan glanced at her and reached out to pull her in. He kissed her face and warmly said, I was strongly requested by your school leader to speak a few words. I'm not interested in such an occasion, but since I've already given T University so much face for you, I'll do my best to see it through to the end. That's right. After all, since Mo Jingshan had agreed to invest in T University, he wasn't joking. No matter what, he had already shouldered the responsibility for this matter. Besides, he was already an investor on the board of directors and an honorary principal. If he didn't give T University any face, he would basically be treating the school leaders like playthings. Jin-won could see that Mo Jingshan was considerate and polite to the managers of the education industry, so she wouldn't embarrass them too much. At this time, the driver was driving, and Jin-won and Mo Jingshan were in the back row. Mo Jingshan didn't let go of her after hugging her, nor did he let her go back to her seat. When he passed by a traffic light intersection, his phone rang. When they reached a traffic light, Mo said, He answered the call. After crossing the intersection, they had already arrived at T University. Jin-won saw that she was going to be late. Seeing that Mo Jingshan was on the phone, she did not waste any time. She threw him a glance, nodded politely at the driver, and got out of the car. Mo Jingshan listened to the call. A moment later, he was quiet and indifferent. Where are they now? Hearing the reply, Mo Jingshan's gaze was calm and unruffled. I got it. Jin-won thought he was going to have a meeting. In the end, all the teachers and students entered T University's largest stadium at the same time. The 7,000 to 8,000 students were all seated. She did not expect there to be such a big crowd. As expected, no matter how low-key Mo Jingshan was, his status was still there. If someone wanted to invite him to say a few words, they did not dare to put on a show for fear of being neglected. But there were too many people. T University Stadium had a capacity of around 15,000 people. Right now, half of the seats were filled with students. The other half was covered by a curtain, and only this half was open. Because they were basking in Professor Lin's light, the students in his class were all seated in the first 3 rows. They could clearly see the person on the stage. Behind them, several students were discussing in low voices. I wonder what the legendary CEO Mo looks like. I heard he's very handsome. Haven't you seen CEO Mo's photo? He's already very handsome. Do you have a photo of him? I haven't been able to find it. Most of the photos I've found on the internet are from his side profile or from a blurry angle taken by business reporters. I've never seen his face, but just his side profile is already very mesmerizing. I reckon he's super handsome. He has to be super handsome. Do you think that Hai Cheng's 2 male gods, Nenchin and Bei Mo, are just rumors? Then hurry and show me the photo. I don't have any either. It's only from his side profile, but I've studied every angle. It's enough to confirm that CEO Mo is a 360-degree man with no blind spots. He's so handsome that it's suffocating. They were still whispering to each other, but Jin-won glanced at the school leaders on the stage, and the corners of her lips curled up slightly. In fact, there were times when a student's world was very simple. Although she did not like it when her man was stared at by various women who drooled over him, right now, she really felt as though she was sitting among her husband's fangirls. Even Bai Wei, who was usually calm and collected, was clearly filled with strong anticipation as she sat by Jin-won's side. There was no need to mention Ling Feifei, who sat by the side. Her eyes were about to pierce through the curtains, wanting to drill in to see if the legendary CEO Mo had arrived. T-City could not be compared to High City. No matter what, the people here did not interact much with the Mo Corporation. Even in High City, there was basically no chance of meeting Mo Jingshan. However, at the very least, the people there had a good understanding of the Mo Corporation's background. Although Mo Jingshan had many fangirls, most of the unmarried young ladies in High City had already seen through reality. They knew that this man was unattainable. Although there were still a few weirdos who persisted in finding trouble with Jinwan, they were basically negligible existences. Seeing that the school leaders were still speaking, everyone sat quietly and chatted for a while before feeling bored. They did not know when CEO Mo would come out. After watching for a while, Bai Wei also turned toward Ling Feifei. She casually asked, "You said you lost that diamond watch for several days. Have you found it?" "Not yet." When Ling Feifei answered, her gaze suddenly seemed to inadvertently shift toward Jinwan. Jinwan, on the other hand, calmly and coldly looked back at her, meeting her gaze. Only then did Ling Feifei quickly turn away, no longer meeting her gaze. Chapter 240. At this moment, the lights in the stadium suddenly dimmed. The school leaders on the stage used an extremely solemn tone to welcome the honorary principal. After the thunderous applause, there was a moment of silence. No one dared to make a sound. He was clearly her husband, but at this moment, Jinwan actually felt a little nervous under such an atmosphere. This was the first time she had seen Mo Jingshan in such an occasion. She did not know what kind of serious and cold role he would play here today. When Mo Jingshan's figure finally appeared on the stage, almost all the young ladies below the stage sucked in a breath. The man who was eagerly invited onto the stage by several school leaders was already standing on the podium on the right side of the stage. In front of him was the podium. Behind him was a large screen with T University's logo against a blue sky. On the screen were soaring white clouds. Mo Jingshan was wearing a white shirt, but it was not swallowed by the white on the screen. Instead, it was especially eye-catching. He was not as Jinwan had imagined. She had thought that he would be dressed in a strict and cold black suit today. She had thought that he would use the most decisive and ruthless methods to catch people off guard in certain important meetings. She had thought that with the title of honorary principal, he would wear a suit and tie like the other school leaders and even hold a microphone in his hand with a solemn expression. But he did not. He was dressed casually in a shirt and trousers. It did not seem deliberate at all. One of the expensive and exquisite buttons on his collar was casually undone, and his sleeves were rolled up to his forearms. Although Mo Jingshan was in a high position, he was still the youngest and most outstanding person in the country's upper class. With his own ability, he had built up the Mo Corporation in just a few years. Furthermore, with his own strategies and means, he had squeezed into the highest position in the country's business world. He was a business god whose net worth was unattainable by countless people. Furthermore, behind him stood the Mo family and America's Shine Group, which were both extremely important. Everything related to Mo Jingshan was a vast number of figures and the country's unfathomable domestic business system. Yet, his appearance at this moment was extremely casual and indifferent. "Oh my God, so handsome!" Around them, soft sighs of admiration could be heard. Some people were even discussing Mo Jingshan's age. Some said that Mo Jingshan appeared to be around the same age as most of the male students in T University, while others said that a man like Mo Jingshan, who was at the peak of his career, should be at least 30 years old and only looked young. Right now, Jinwan was the only one who knew the exact answer. Most university graduates were around 23 years old. Mo Jingshan was only 3 years older than them. Many of the students present were those who had been held back or re-enrolled. They were around the same age as him, but they were still under the school's management. Their appearances and experiences were simple and ordinary. Even the school hunks of T University's female students paled in comparison to him. However, the man on the stage was very low-key and simple even today. The man was so clean that he didn't even need to do any styling. Under the stage lights, his deep, pitch-black brows and eyes were beautiful and distinct. It was completely indescribable with words. Such a man couldn't be replicated by anyone. This man stood there, only a faint smile, but in an instant, other than him, the sun and moon lost their light. Everyone, this is the first time we've met. Mo Jingshan stood behind the podium that was commonly seen in schools. He held the microphone on it, one hand casually resting on the podium while the other gently raised the microphone. His pale lips carried 3 parts of a smile and 7 parts of calmness and indifference. The man's tone was casual and not deliberate at all. It was as if he was not invited to speak, but as if he was facing a group of young people who had yet to officially step into society. He put down his identity and gave everyone a simple smile in a polite and approachable manner. He said, "I'm Mo Jingshan." With just this sentence, the audience immediately applauded thunderously. Jinwan also rushed to applaud. However, looking at the man who was the center of attention on the stage, looking at his otherworldly calm and indifference, looking at this well-dressed man, she inexplicably recalled the scene last night when she was pressed down on the bed by him. She really couldn't see any trace of him being fierce to her in bed for the past few nights. What kind of man was he exactly? He could calmly control the overall situation in the company. The life and death of many small and medium-sized enterprises and many business strategies were in his hands. He clearly had a pair of hands that could move clouds and rain with one turn of the hand. Yet, he was very close to Nan Heng, a person who had a complicated background and was wandering on the fringes of the foreign arms business. Furthermore, he could stand here with the title of T University's honorary principal. I'm very grateful to all the students of T University for coming here and having a pleasant and simple meeting with me. Everyone below the stage was quiet. The boys looked up at the man standing at the top, each of them thinking about whether they would one day have such an achievement. The girls looked up at the man, but at the same time, they were also tempted and drooling. As everyone knows, T University is the most high-end institution of higher learning in the country. It nurtures numerous talents for the country's economy and various large enterprises. From now on, Mo Corporation will not only invest in the reconstruction of T University's century-old library, but we have also reached an agreement with T University to choose T University as our first choice in the future's recruitment fairs. At this point, Mo Jingshan's smiling gaze shifted to Jinwan, who was sitting in the 3rd row in front of him. Jinwan's position was not particularly obvious, but the man's gaze had already landed on her face. In the gymnasium that held several thousand people, everyone was looking seriously at the man on the stage. However, because of his gaze, the solemn crowd suddenly began to whisper among themselves. They were all asking, what was COMO looking at? Which direction was he looking at? The school leaders also subconsciously looked in that direction because of his gaze. However, the lights on the stage were too dim. They could not make out the students' faces and could not tell who he was looking at. While everyone was curious, Mo Jingshan calmly withdrew his gaze. He unhurriedly curved his lips into a perfect curve and raised his hand to indicate for everyone to stay focused. In an instant, Jinwan's heart that had been raised to her throat slowly calmed down. Chapter 241. His actions immediately attracted everyone's attention. They were originally wondering who COMO was looking at earlier, but now, they had all raised their heads to stare unwaveringly at him. Jinwan was suddenly very nervous. Previously, she had clearly said that she did not want to expose anything in these few months at T University. However, Mo Jingshan's earlier glance was really too dangerous. Ling Feifei, who was seated by Jinwan's side, already felt her heart churning. She recalled that earlier, Tao Mo seemed to be looking at her. Ling Feifei wondered if Xiao Mo was looking at her earlier. She shyly raised her hand to press against her cheeks. She was so agitated that her hands were trembling. The students seated here must have grown tired of hearing the so-called official words in your more than 10 years of student life. What's more, you're tired of listening to the various polite speeches you've long memorized. Mo Jingshan's voice was clear and indifferent. Very good. If you're not willing to listen, I'm not willing to speak. The group of students below the stage immediately laughed. Great Boss Mo's words had really struck straight at their hearts. I'm a businessman, and I travel the business world. In the past 2 years, I've indeed been invited by several local business universities to be a visiting professor in the management department or business department. However, I've rejected them all. I really don't have the time or energy. Teaching and educating people is a noble profession. An executioner like me, who has mingled in a bloody business world, is not suitable for it. Everyone below the stage held their breaths to listen. This is T University. The majority of those seated here are aiming for the business department. In the future, a large portion of you will also be involved in the business world. The reason why I use the words bloody business is naturally not to frighten you. You'll be learning all sorts of knowledge here. I don't need to elaborate on what you're all aiming for by enrolling here. After all, T University's full name has the word business behind it. This isn't a playground, but a military camp for war preparations outside of the battlefield. Since I've already been given the title of an honorary principal, I should be mainly encouraging you. However, as I've said earlier, you've heard enough official words. Mo Jingshan's tone changed, and his faint smile abruptly disappeared. This is the reserve base for domestic business talents. Everyone has a dream, but if it's so easy to reach your dreams, you wouldn't have gone through so many trials and gone through so many difficulties to obtain a letter of acceptance. Do you think that just because you've entered T University, there will already be famous companies waving at you? Do you think that just because you've entered T University, you'll naturally be able to inherit your family's business? Mo Jingshan chuckled. You're wrong. To enter this place, you have to put in 10 times the effort. Furthermore, this is just the beginning. The laughter of the girls below the stage gradually died down, and the light in the eyes of the boys also changed a little. Do you think you can spread your wings and soar after graduating? He laughed again. In the big melting pot of the shopping mall, where people kill without spilling blood, only 1 out of 100 people can stand. No one below the stage was laughing anymore. What do you want to do here? Aside from learning basic skills, you also need to train your heart. In this short period of time, there are already some who are destined to be eliminated. If you don't want to be eliminated, start working hard today. At least it's better than being chased off the stage. You'll be able to grasp the tail of opportunity better. This was a psychological attack. After all, the students who were able to enter T University all thought of themselves as very capable and proud. There were also many business students who had their eyes on the top of their heads and thought that they were unparalleled in the world. Only this kind of psychological attack would be able to get them to listen. It was also the most effective type. Initially, the school leaders were scared witless, thinking that COMO was here to tear them down. However, after listening to the end, they finally put on smiles of admiration and joy. Amidst the silence, only Jinwan smiled. To be able to speak so patiently to a group of students, she had truly witnessed another side of Mo Jingshan. She did not laugh out loud, nor was it very sudden. However, Mo Jingshan's gaze suddenly landed on her face. The faint smile on the man's lips did not diminish, but the color of his eyes deepened. After pausing for a moment, he smiled slightly and aimed at the microphone, asking clearly, "The female student in the 3rd row, 5 seats away from Professor Lin, can you tell me, why are you smiling?" Jinwan. Translator, Henyi Translations Editor. Henyi Translations. In the silent stadium, the thousands of students immediately turned their gazes to the direction of the 3rd row, searching for the person 5 seats away from Professor Lin. The people in the back row couldn't see clearly, and the people in the front row couldn't see clearly because the lights were too dim. Only those closest to Jinwan were able to accurately direct their gazes toward Jinwan's face. Amidst the silence, Jinwan watched the smiling man on the stage. He was smiling, but in her heart, she was gritting her teeth. He did it on purpose. Thus, intentionally. This speech was indeed not very official. From the initial blow to the final uplifting speech, it was truly fascinating. When Mo Jingshan placed the microphone down and turned to leave the stage, there were still many students who wished for him to continue speaking. The school leaders once again began to speak about various official pleasantries. After another half an hour, they finally ended. The students all rushed out of the stadium. Jinwan was originally about to leave with everyone when Ling Feifei suddenly turned back. Her sharp eyes caught sight of Mo Jingshan, who was currently speaking with the school leaders behind the curtains. Seeing that Mo Jingshan had not left, She abruptly and quietly turned back by herself. Bai Wei saw Ling Feifei's stealthy and sneaky movements and turned to look at her. At the same time, she also noticed the scene behind the curtains. "Ai, Jin Wan," Bai Wei softly called out to Jin Wan, gently tapping her arm. "Jin Wan, what is it? Look behind you." Bai Wei lowered her voice. Jin Wan raised her brows and turned back. After taking a glance, she understood. These few days, she's lost her diamond watch and stirred up other things. Clearly, she's trying to find fault with you, and Feng Ling didn't come today, so I'm afraid she'll take advantage of the fact that the school leaders are here to say something about you. She's really too unreliable. She can easily splash dirty water on others. Come, let's follow her to take a look. Bai Wei held Jinwan's hand and turned to head back. Jinwan did not mind this. Ling Feifei's brainless actions were not worth her concern. However, seeing that Ling Feifei was clearly heading in Mo Jingshan's direction, she did not reject and turned back with Bai Wei. Chapter 242. Whatever you do, we'll do the same. Our legs are on everyone's bodies. Are we not allowed to come over? Bai Wei calmly retorted. Ling Feifei. Her expression was unhappy as she turned back to look at Mo Jingshan. The curtains and screens had already been removed. The students had either left or were queuing up by the entrance. Only Jinwan, Bai Wei, and Ling Feifei remained below the stage. They appeared suspicious and immediately attracted the attention of the school leaders. Jinwan, Bai Wei, and Ling Feifei stood below the stage. "The few of you, why aren't you leaving the stadium? What are you looking at?" The school leaders immediately turned back to look at them in dissatisfaction. "Hurry up and leave. Don't peek here." Ling Feifei rushed to speak up. "Headmaster, we still have some doubts about what CEO Mo said earlier. We wish to discuss it with CEO Mo." Originally, she should have said, "I," but Ling Feifei ended up saying "we," giving the opportunity to be scolded to Jinwan and Bai Wei. Bai Wei silently rolled her eyes. Jinwan slightly raised her brows. Mo Jingshan only glanced over there. When he caught a glimpse of Jinwan's figure among them, he remained calm and turned around. "What do you want to discuss?" Jinwan's eyes were still calm. "What do you want to discuss?" Ling Feifei did not expect that after President Mo heard her words, he would actually take notice. She immediately ignored the glare of the school leaders and quickly walked over. "Hello, President Mo. I'm a business management student taught by Professor Lin. My name is Ling Feifei. My family is from the Ling Corporation Bank." After hearing her name, Mo Jingshan had already turned to look at the other two people who had yet to approach. Seeing that CEO Mo was looking at them, Ling Feifei's heart was filled with displeasure. However, she forced a smile and said, "Those two are in the same class as me. They also live in the same dormitory. Like me, they're both Professor Lin's students." The school leaders saw that these female students were clearly here to pester or spout nonsense. They were about to step forward to stop them when Mo Jingshan's gaze caused them to retreat. "They're all Professor Lin's students?" Mo Jingshan smiled. It seemed like when CEO Mo mentioned the person 5 seats away from Professor Lin, he did not pay attention to Jinwan's appearance at all. It had only been a short while, but he did not recognize that they were the ones sitting very close to Professor Lin. The smile on Ling Feifei's face deepened. She suddenly said sweetly, "Sir Mo, I really don't quite understand what you just said. If you're not busy, would you mind having a meal together?" The school leaders, Bai Wei, Jinwan, this was too brazen. Jinwan had met a lot of rivals in love, but no matter which one of them was, at least, scheming. She had never met anyone who directly asked to have dinner with Mo Jingshan in front of her. Compared to the speechless expressions of the others, Mo Jingshan casually glanced at Ling Feifei, asking without emotion, "If you have anything to say, just ask. Why do we need to eat? It's almost noon now. President Mo must be hungry. Anyway, it's time for lunch. Let's talk while eating." Ling Feifei smiled sweetly, as though she thought that her beauty could move the man before her. Although Jinwan and Bai Wei approached, Jinwan did not speak. Instead, she wore a slight smile on her face as she watched this scene. It was as though she wanted to watch Mo Jingshan's show. That's true. It's indeed almost noon. The school leaders suddenly interjected. So Mo, we've already arranged a place for lunch. The other school leaders and leaders from the city's education department will be coming. Why don't you join us for lunch? Hearing the school leaders' interference, Ling Feifei could not pull a long face even if she wanted to. She thought for a moment and suddenly reached out to pull Jinwan over, saying, Mo, my roommate is also from High City. Although she's only the manager of a small studio in High City, she doesn't have many opportunities to meet you. However, she actually managed to meet you in T City, which is thousands of miles away from High City. Isn't this a rare fate? Mo, give me some face. Let's go for lunch together. Jinwan was about to push her away when she heard her next words, and her lips trembled. She subtly pushed Ling Feifei's hand away and turned her gaze to Mo Jingshan. The man looked at her meaningfully and asked with a light smile, You're from High City? Jinwan, Mo is asking you a question. Are you scared silly? Hurry up and answer. Ling Feifei reached out to pull Jinwan, but Jinwan purposely kept her distance. When she reached out, she returned to Bai Wei's side. To avoid awkwardness, Ling Feifei smiled and turned to look at Mo Jingshan. So Mo, don't mind them. My roommates are all shy. Actually, they really want to have a chance to talk to you. Mo Jingshan held back a smile as he glanced at Jinwan. When he withdrew his gaze, he did not look at Ling Feifei again. At the same time, the school leaders came over to say, Mo, the leaders from the education department and the principal are already preparing to head to the restaurant. Do you want to go with them? I'll be staying in T City for a period of time. There's still plenty of time for me to eat with the school leaders. There's no rush, Mo Jingshan calmly said. Many years ago, when I was studying abroad, I've long heard about the university cafeterias in the country. Since it's already lunchtime, and since my classmates have invited me so warmly, why don't I follow you to T University's cafeteria for a walk and have lunch here? How about it? T University's cafeteria? Ling Feifei's dream of sitting with CEO Mo in a certain Western restaurant was instantly shattered. Bai Wei, who had not interjected all this while, finally spoke up. CEO Mo, if you really have such plans, T University's cafeteria is naturally the best choice. The chefs in T University's cafeteria are really skilled. It can be said that they are better than any other university's cafeteria in the country. Do you want to try it with us? The school leaders were about to collapse. What kind of god was Mo Jingshan? In the end, he refused to stay in the 7-star hotel that the school leaders had arranged for him. Right now, he didn't even want to go to the best restaurant the school had arranged for him. He actually wanted to squeeze into the cafeteria with a bunch of students? What kind of taste was this? Or was it some kind of hobby? However, Mo Jingshan had already personally spoken. The school leaders originally wanted to tactfully mention it again. In the end, under Bai Wei's polite invitation, Mo Jingshan lightly curved his lips. Alright, students, please lead the way. Seeing that Mo Jingshan really wanted to go to the cafeteria, Ling Feifei had never eaten in a cafeteria ever since she came to T University. Even if the food was said to be good, she felt that the food in this type of cafeteria could not be too clean. The quality was also average, so she had never gone there. But now, Chapter 243. The school leaders were afraid of neglecting him and originally planned to follow Mo Jingshan. However, the moment they lifted their feet, they heard Mo Jingshan's words before he left. It's enough with these students leading the way. You guys should go do what you need to do. There's no need to come with us. Mo Jingshan did not plan on letting them follow him. The school leaders were not foolish. They could tell his intentions and did not follow him. After thinking about it carefully, they felt that the 3 female students wouldn't be able to stir up any trouble in front of Mo Jingshan. Even if the 3 female students had any unruly ideas, they wouldn't be able to hide from people like Mo Jingshan. They didn't need to worry too much about it. There were indeed many people in the cafeteria. Due to Mo Jingshan's sudden appearance, the students in the cafeteria were in an uproar. Although the school leaders did not dare to follow them, they still sent security guards to maintain order in the cafeteria. The students who were rushing toward them were all chided by the security guards to return to the cafeteria and queue up. Not a single one of them was allowed to walk around Mo Jingshan. After Mo Jingshan entered, he calmly scanned the surroundings and stood at the back of the crowd. Seeing that the great CEO Mo was actually queuing up in the cafeteria, the people in front took the initiative to give up their spots. Mo Jingshan thanked them but did not go over. He remained standing in his original spot. Right now, Jin Wan and Bai Wei stood behind Ling Feifei, while Ling Feifei stood behind Mo Jingshan. Furthermore, she purposely stood very close to him. There were two people between Jin Wan and Mo Jingshan. There were quite a number of people who wanted to give up their spots. Gradually, some of them were embarrassed to stand in front of Mo Jingshan. Seeing that Mo Jingshan did not move to the front, they all consciously moved to the back. The long queue gradually shortened until they became the center of the line. The people in front who were almost there did not pay much attention to the back. After all, there were several lines here. Some people did not give up their spots. Ling Feifei saw that these people were not aware of it and suddenly walked to the front, rudely chasing them to the back. When the people in front realized that CEO Mo was queuing with them, they rushed to the back of the line. Mo Jingshan's indifferent gaze swept past them. He spoke to the spoiled Ling Feifei in an unperturbed and emotionless voice. If you don't have the awareness to line up properly, you should at least learn not to decide for me whether to stand at the front or the back after I've already made my intentions clear. You don't have the right to chase away anyone who's queuing according to the rules. Ling Feifei, who had been proudly showing off to everyone that she was the closest to Mo, was suddenly scolded by Mo Jingshan's expressionless and cold voice. She immediately bit her lips heavily, her brows showing a hint of unhappiness and stubbornness. "COMO, I'm only doing this so that you can quickly taste the canteen's food. Furthermore, your time is precious. Lining up is too much of a waste of time. That's why I want everyone to consciously give up their spots." Mo Jingshan coldly and indifferently said, "Then you'd better learn to put away your self-righteous thoughts." Ling Feifei had initially thought that CEO Mo had a slight impression of her, which was why he had agreed to have a meal together. He had even lowered himself to come to T University's canteen. She did not expect that he would not give her any face. Ling Feifei felt extremely embarrassed. However, there were so many people watching. Furthermore, Mo Jingshan was the honorary principal. It was not too bad for a student to be lectured by a principal. She quickly suppressed her emotions and lowered her head to apologize. "I'm sorry. I'll be more careful in the future. I won't act on my own." As she spoke, she consciously returned to the line. Bai Wei and Jin Wan were very close. Jin Wan heard Bai Wei use a voice that only she could hear to say, "Serves you right." Although Ling Feifei indeed deserved it, Jin Wan's attention was never on Ling Feifei. Ever since they left the stadium, she had been trying to find an opportunity to meet Mo Jingshan's gaze. She wanted to ask him if he was serious. Was he really going to T University's canteen? However, the man did not place his gaze on her again. She could not find an opportunity to meet his gaze. Now that there were two people between them, there was no chance for her to ask what exactly he was planning. Was he trying to make her heart, which was currently beating wildly, suffer a heart attack? After much difficulty, they finally managed to queue up to buy the canteen's set meal. Another student took the initiative to give up a clean table for them. After Mo Jingshan sat down, Ling Feifei rushed to sit by his side. However, Bai Wei took the seat first. Of course, she maintained an appropriate distance and did not cross the line. Ling Feifei was exasperated. She took the tray in her hands and sat across from Mo Jingshan. However, the moment she approached, she saw that Jin Wan had already taken the seat across from him. Although she wanted to scold them and chase them away, Mo Jingshan was sitting right here. She had to maintain her image and could only endure. She put on an aggrieved expression and sat diagonally across from Mo Jingshan. "There's no soup in today's set meal. Do you guys want to drink water?" Bai Wei asked. "All right, then go buy a few bottles of mineral water." So Mo spoke so much earlier. "I'm sure he hasn't drunk any water yet, right?" Ling Feifei opened her mouth. After speaking for so long, she only had Bai Wei by it. She remained seated. Bai Wei narrowed her eyes at her. The canteen supermarket is just 10 meters behind you. I'll have to walk much further than you to go around such a long table. You only need to turn back and walk a few steps to buy it. Are you sure you want me to go? In any case, didn't Ling Feifei wish to pretend in front of Xiao Mo? She could continue acting. She could not find an opportunity to order others around. Bai Wei would not spoil her. Ling Feifei turned back to glance in the direction of the supermarket. Jinwan, you go. I'm not thirsty. If you want a drink, go buy it yourself. Jinwan used her chopsticks to pick out the bones of a piece of fish. She patiently picked through it while calmly speaking without raising her eyelids. Ling Feifei immediately rolled her eyes at her. She placed down her chopsticks and stood up to head to the supermarket. Mo, we weren't too rude earlier in the stadium, were we? Seeing that the noisy Ling Feifei had left, Bai Wei politely asked. Mo Jingshan glanced at the fish bone Jinwan was picking out and saw that she had also picked out a very small, thin, and hard-to-find bone. After making sure that she would not be stuck in her throat, he looked away and said indifferently, "No." Jinwan was stunned. The silence did not last more than 3 minutes before Ling Feifei returned with water. She had only bought 2 bottles. Clearly, one for her and one for Mo Jingshan. When she sat down, she placed a bottle of water in front of him. She smiled sweetly and said, "Sumo, please have some water." At this moment, the fish Jinwan had just eaten was slightly salty. She immediately coughed. Mo Jingshan expressionlessly pushed the bottle of mineral water that had not been placed down for more than 5 seconds in front of Jinwan. His thin lips only spat out 2 words, "You drink." Chapter 244. Jinwan's throat was indeed salty. She instinctively picked up the bottle, twisted it open, and drank a mouthful. Ling Feifei's expression immediately became longer. "Xiao Mo, I bought this water for you. Earlier, my roommate said that she wasn't thirsty. There's no need for her to drink your water. Earlier was earlier. Now is now. Can't you see that Jinwan has been salted? Speaking of which, the fish is indeed a little salty today." Bai Wei glanced at Ling Feifei as she spoke. "Also, don't always call me your roommate. Do Jinwan and I not have names? I was afraid that CEO Mo wouldn't be able to remember so many names in such a short amount of time, so I didn't say anything." Ling Feifei carelessly explained as she glanced at Jinwan in dissatisfaction. Seeing that Jinwan had no qualms about drinking the water, she became even more unhappy. "Thank you, Xiao Mo, for the water." After Jinwan finished drinking, she placed the bottle down and raised her eyes to speak to Mo Jingshan. She then smiled as though there was no one else present. To others, this smile of hers was purely a smile of thanks. However, from Mo Jingshan's perspective, this little woman was intentionally watching him make a scene, and now, she was clearly seducing him. "No need to thank me." He also smiled slightly. His gaze was deep, appearing calm and indifferent. Seeing that Jinwan and Mo Jingshan could speak to each other over a bottle of water, Ling Feifei felt even more upset. She suddenly regretted dragging Bai Wei and Jinwan along to look for Mo Jingshan. Otherwise, the two of them would most likely never have the chance to sit and eat with someone like Mo Jingshan in this lifetime. Furthermore, earlier on, she was the one who suggested to have a meal together. Right now, Mo had only come to a place like the cafeteria to give her face. If not for her, would Jinwan and Bai Wei have such an opportunity? However, although she was unhappy, Mo Jingshan was seated diagonally across from her. Ling Feifei controlled herself and did not continue dwelling on this problem. She only said, "Sumo, why don't I go buy another bottle for you?" "No need." Mo Jingshan also picked up the fish bones on his plate, calmly replying. His gaze was very light. T University's cafeteria would always be bustling with noise during lunch break. But today, because of Mo Jingshan's presence, many of the students did not speak loudly or play around. After eating, they quietly filed out. It was rare for them to be so quiet. Ling Feifei had barely eaten anything. She truly felt that the food in the canteen was not very tasty. However, when she saw that Mo Jingshan didn't seem to dislike her at all, and his table manners were calm and elegant. Such a lofty man actually had such a mundane side to him. The more she looked at him, the more charming he became. After taking a few bites, Ling Feifei could not help but mutter, "President Mo, don't blame me for being talkative, but you're really so handsome." After that, she continued to ask in a low voice, "Mo, are you married?" Ahem. Jinwan suddenly coughed. He coughed as if he was choking. He turned to the ground and coughed a few times, then picked up the bottle of mineral water again. Mo Jingshan glanced at her. Jinwan avoided his eyes, held back her cough, and drank several mouthfuls of water. Ling Feifei was extremely displeased with Jinwan's despicable actions of intentionally diverting Mo Jingshan's attention. "Jinwan, why are you coughing out of the blue? Can't you see that he's talking? The fish is too salty." Jinwan placed it in the water. "You're still eating salty fish? It's salted fish. If it's not salty, how can it be called salted fish?" Bai Wei said. Ling Feifei decided to ignore them. Her gaze stubbornly turned to Mo Jingshan. "So Mo, is it convenient for me to answer my earlier question?" Mo Jingshan's gaze was calm, gentle, and unhurried. "I'm married." Ling Feifei's anxious and expectant expression immediately collapsed. First, she did not expect him to actually be married. Secondly, she did not expect him to answer so directly. "It's such a pity that Mo actually got married so early. What's there to pity about marriage?" Mo Jingshan coldly glanced at her, his tone clear. "I'm very fortunate to be able to marry my current wife. After having her, my once unchanging life has changed because of her. In my eyes, she is the most important person. Once a person walks through the world, they must have a pair of hands that will never leave. Only then will they not truly be alone." Jinwan's eating movements gradually slowed down. She raised her eyes to look at the man sitting opposite her, only to see that his eyes were filled with a hint of warmth that she often saw. She actually did not know that when Mo Jingshan mentioned her in front of outsiders, he would actually be like this. "It seems like CEO Mo really loves your wife. I'm so envious." Ling Feifei forced a smile. All of a sudden, she really wanted to know what kind of woman a man like Mo Jingshan would treat so attentively was like. Hearing the word "really loves," Jinwan's grip on her chopsticks tightened. In an instant, her heart seemed to be filled with boiling emotions. If she had not maintained her composure, she would have directly pounced into this man's embrace. Unfortunately, at this moment, a male student from Professor Lin's class walked into the cafeteria and bought a bottle of water. Just as he was about to leave, he suddenly spotted Jinwan and smiled at her, revealing his white teeth. "Jinwan, I was wondering why I couldn't find you anywhere. Why did you suddenly run to the cafeteria to eat?" After all, Jinwan had good looks and was usually quiet and low-key. Many of the hedonistic young masters in Professor Lin's class had good impressions of Jinwan. When they walked past each other in T University, those cold and arrogant fellows would always greet Jinwan amiably. Today was not an exception. However, from Mo Jingshan's perspective, that was not the case. Jinwan smiled and turned back to greet him. When she turned back, she met the man's mild gaze. Several minutes later, Jinwan rose to head to the restroom. T University's cafeteria's restroom was very clean and quiet. Every half an hour, a cleaning lady would come to clean it. Although there were many students entering and leaving, it was still very clean. At this moment, many students had already left the cafeteria. Jinwan walked into the female restroom and turned on the tap to let out the water. She leisurely rubbed her hands. After washing up, she had just turned off the water when a white figure suddenly flashed in. She turned back and saw Mo Jingshan. "This is the female." Jinwan was about to speak when she saw him close the restroom door. Jinwan's hands were still wet. She was startled for a moment before hurriedly placing her hands under the air dryer to dry them. As the wind whistled, the man's long lashes lowered. He looked at her and took 2 steps forward. "What happened to the man earlier?" "You're tuning in to the Passion Page's YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.